delinquency list?
No, I sent an email and asked about it again. I still don't get it.
It's amazing, isn't
I
it?
told him I was frustrated at that. We're paying him $9,000 tonight.
Everybody ready?
What I'm thinking. Notice that?
It's refreshing until it becomes a nuisance.
Yeah.
Then not so much.
You hit me with that hammer.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency. It's December 12th, 2022. Merry Christmas, everybody. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Porter.
Here.
Commissioner Doty.
Here.
Commissioner Warwick. Here. Commissioner Aldred.
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Here.
Welcome again, everybody. As per usual, are there any conflicts of interest among the commissioners having to do with tonight's agenda?
Commissioner Porter.
Mr. Moore?
Sure. Sorry. For me.
Perhaps. Mr. Waterman? Item number 5 that appears now on our consent calendar. Mr. Moore is a member of the Lions Club, whose names are on the park where we're talking about an issue. Does that constitute any conflict at all?
President. Chair and Commission, I don't believe so unless the Lions Club has an active contractual relationship, which I don't believe there is. It was just simply named, yes, so there's no conflict. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Waterman. Okay. All right. Everybody clear? Very good. I don't believe we have any. Mr. McDonald.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, the Lions Park irrigation, we were gonna pull that off the agenda because that was gonna become a city project or funded through other means through the city and not urban renewal.
Very good.
If that is correct, that's what we had talked about, yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I don't know of any special presentations this evening, so we will move right down to public comments. Are there any members of the audience this evening that would like to address the Urban Renewal Agency on any items that are not on the agenda? Very good. That brings us to the consent calendar. Do we have a motion on the disposition of the consent calendar?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I move that we move items 2 through 8 on the consent calendar to new business, please, for further discussion.
Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Warwick, a second by Mr. Doty. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Warwick.
Yes.
Commissioner Aldred.
Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Commissioner Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Doty.
Okay, that will move them down into our action items this evening under new business, and that leaves one item on the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last Urban Renewal Agency meeting?
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
I move we
War-
approve minutes from the last meeting.
Very good. We have a motion by Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Moore. Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Warwick.
Yes.
Commissioner Aldred.
Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Commissioner Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Doty.
Yeah.
Okay, this brings us down to the old business, and our first matter is an action item. It's the request to consider authorizing approval of a funding partnership as requested by Destination Caldwell in the amount of $245,000 from the Urban Renewal Agency for the implementation of the signage infrastructure project identified in the Downtown Caldwell Wayfinding and Parking Signage Plan, which is about 400 pages in your packet. What's the disposition of the agency?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
as I recall, when we set this aside to discuss this week, we were gonna ask the treasurer some opinions on what we had money for and what we didn't.
Okay, very good. Are you here, Rochelle? Would you like to come address this and give us an overview of where we stand?
Good evening.
Evening.
tonight, as presented to you, is a list of projects that we, the city, have worked hard to get and solidify down to the few that we can afford with the remaining funds left with the Urban Renewal Agency as we close out the funds. I'm gonna go through it, and then I guess if you guys have any questions, we can go from there.
Just a second, Mr. Waterman?
Rochelle, you sure you're on the right agenda item?
Oh, sorry. I'm not feeling very well, so.
I believe we're on the agenda item related to the wayfinding proposal.
Yes.
Correct.
Oh, that's, am I
Julie-
presenting that?
Julie, maybe state
I
your
don't-
question again.
What was the question
Rochelle.
on that?
When we discussed,
Uh-huh.
Destination Caldwell's request for those funds,
Yes.
we're all in favor of that project happening, but we just weren't sure how, if we had money to fund it. So we were kind of looking to you to look into
Okay.
that and let us
Got
know
you.
where we're at with that
Got
before
you.
we
Sorry.
agree to spend any money. That's okay.
We did have that as a potential project for funding, but we did not include it in the final project listing, as it stands tonight. We felt that there were other priority projects that would be needed to take place. We also had some cost increases to existing projects, so some final big costs came in, and we had to really look at what we had presented you last time, and we had to cut almost $3 million worth of projects from the last time we saw you to today because of increases in cost estimates for some of the projects that are on this list that we will review later tonight. But with that being said, we had to sit down and discuss what really we thought was going to be of best use and to close up the urban renewal funding and bring it to where it is now. And that was a project that we decided could potentially have funding coming from another source.
That
Very good.
answers the question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Discussion? Mr. Allgood?
This is the last meeting of the URA, am I correct?
For this,
We're
for this
sunsetting, yes.
area,
Yeah,
in
for
terms
this
of
area.
funding, yeah.
So, I don't know if we're prepared, but if we cut out 3 million, what did we cut out? Who knows?
You may as well just stay there,
I know,
Michelle.
I'm like, that's why I was like, we should just review this
Yeah.
anyway. So the two projects that increased the most in cost was the 7th Avenue Arthur Street Festive extension that we're doing in downtown Plaza. We had originally budgeted that at around $1 million, and it came in at 3.2.
Wow.
The other one that increased significantly was the Centennial Boulevard medium. We decided to only fund that partially through Urban Renewal. We had originally budgeted $500,000 from Urban Renewal. I think the total overall cost came up to 1.5-ish. Is that right? For the Centennial? It was 770. And so with those increased costs, we had a project on there for some downtown improvements. Those were just unforeseen improvements. We took that out. We took some of the smaller pending projects that had not yet been approved, one of which was the wayfinding. We cut costs on some of these other projects as far as decreased the funding. We took the irrigation project out for Lions Park and made a few other adjustments here to these projects. And so that's how we were able to come up with the project list that we have today.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Doty?
So if we wanted to approve something off of old business, then we need to possibly eliminate something off the consent calendar, which has been pulled and added for us to discuss later, correct?
If we wanted to approve something, Doug might be able to provide. Some of it might already be included in here, such as, I know the wayfinding is not included in the project. The alleyway improvement project, I think, is already considered and in there. I don't think there's anything in there for the, RRC DDA, but I'm not sure if there's anything in that contract that says to set aside anything. And then the Amano, I don't know if any of these are gonna be related to project costs, because most of them are having to do with DDA agreements that we have with developers. So unless there's a clause in there that says we're going to provide improvements, then we've tried to allot for it already, so we do have alleyway improvements already listed in here. So I guess that would depend on what's presented with those. But ideally, if there were any additional costs being requested by the agency in those DDAs, essentially, we would have to identify what funding source we would want to take it from tonight on this project list. And then you guys would identify that to us, and I would make note of it, and then that would be the final list that goes to council next week to solidify the project. So we can make changes tonight, we just need to make sure we're identifying the specific changes and where we want the funding to go. The project, or the remaining funds available in urban renewal, isn't gonna change. So yes, if we do decide to fund anything that's not already included in the project list, we would have to identify where that's going to come out of. And you guys could give us direction on that.
I think that answers the question. Yeah.
Make a motion, whatever.
Okay.
It would be, so, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Doty?
So I'll make a motion, based on what I'm hearing, is that we do not accept, right? Action item number 1, an amount of $245,000, that we do not approve that request.
Everybody clear on the motion? Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Doty, a second by Mr. Allgood. Any further comment or questions? Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick?
A reluctant yes.
Commissioner Allgood?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes. Okay, very good. This takes us to our second action item under old business, to consider resolution approving the alleyway improvement project. Rob, are you speaking to that one? Good evening.
So, in this particular item, in the development by Aztec Development of the property immediately across from the band shell on the plaza, there were improvements to the alleyway that were a part of the DDA. The concern would be that in the event that, and those improvements, while they are an incentive to Aztec Development to complete their development, are also something that has independent value. It's bringing the alleyway into aesthetic conformity with the remainder of the plaza. And the alleyway is used to access, as I understand, the trash compactor back there, and is alley adjacent and an extension thereof, or sorry, plaza adjacent, and makes sense to have that be an aesthetic extension thereof. And so this resolution does not create a new obligation. It simply segregates the obligation so that in the event that Aztec does not follow through with the DDA as they're required to do, that the funds that were already earmarked for that alleyway improvement, that they go to doing that anyway. So 6 months from now, something goes sideways, unfortunately, and the agency winds up having to dispose of that property again to a different entity. The alley still gets improved based on sort of its independent value to the downtown area and the aesthetic there.
Questions? Are we all familiar with the alley that is being talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We know the dollar amount of that?
Rob, that portion of the, construction, how much was, budgeted for that?
Mr. Chairman, we had budgeted, a total of 450,000, and 250,000 was for underground power, and that was through that alley. And then in addition to that, it was the alley, directly south of that between Arthur and Blaine. And then also the alley, portions, it originally intended for the alley that was, near the vineyard as well. And so that was the underground, the power through all those alleys. And then there was another 200,000, which my understanding was that would go toward the alley improvement at this location to facilitate access to the trash enclosure area.
And so my understanding is that both, I'm not certain if the, electrical extension is part of the, package that is the DDA associated improvement, but the purpose of the resolution is to separate out entirely the things that Rob just described from being contingent in some way on the completion by Aztec development of their project.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Doty?
A little bit off topic, but still probably relevant to this. Do we know if Aztec development is meeting their timeline, so to speak?
So I don't know for certain whether they are. Mr. Hilty did not provide me with a red flag to bring here that they were not. And so I also understanding is that they have obtained experienced legal counsel that is familiar with the process in a way that is helping inform their sense for sort of the rigidity of their obligations as obligations. And so I know Mr. Hilty's general sense of that project is significantly more confident in terms of its progress than it was prior to that. So that's a long way of saying I have not heard that they are violating their timeline, which I would take as an indication that they are complying with it.
And this expense will be part of the final presentation of projects when we look at it a little bit later this evening?
Chair and Commission, I'm not certain if this one will be in the list there. I think this is already committed. The distinction is that this resolution separates it out from its contingency on a different commitment, but the funds are already going to that purpose. The contract's already been entered into. So I don't think this is one of the ones that by not adopting this resolution, the consequence of that would be it would leave the construction contingent, but the funds are already set aside for that purpose.
Okay. Other questions?
If I could address the commission on the Aztec question?
Certainly.
I'm Ann Kunkel, Varen Thomas.
Good evening, Ann.
Varen Thomas, 242 North 8th Street, Boise. I'm actually Aztec's, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. I'm actually their counsel, so to address where they are in the performance of the DDA. The first step that we had to do after the approval of the DDA in November was the 30 days to get the schedule of performance completed. That's been submitted to Mr. Hilty. There's been some back and forth on that just today, just some cleanup items, cross-references, but that's in process with your counsel, and we're hopeful to wrap that up, which was the next step. And then I believe after that was we were waiting for the survey so we could do our title review. I've already completed title review, so that's in the process. So we are in the process of complying with the schedule of performance as it's been drafted to the state.
Thank you.
If you have any other questions,
other
I'd be
questions for
happy
Ann?
to answer them. I know it's a little off topic, but since it was raised, I
Great.
thought I would
Thank
address
you.
it since I was
Thanks for
here.
stepping up.
Yeah, thank you
Appreciate that.
very much.
So any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them for the council.
Very good.
Thank you.
Commission.
Well, I will read this resolution and then we will discuss its outcome. A resolution of the Urban Renewal Agency of the City of Caldwell, Idaho, authorizing an improvement project for the alleyway bisecting the block between Main Street and Arthur Street, southwesterly of Kimball Avenue from the plaza to the USPS property. Do we have a motion in regard to this resolution?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I move we accept the resolution as spoken.
Very good. We have a motion by Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Moore. Any other comments or conversation or questions? Okay, would the secretary call the roll?
Yes.
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 Very good. This takes us to action item number 3 in old business. Consider a resolution approving the development and disposition agreement, the DDA, with RRC Contractors for property located at Blaine and Kimball in downtown. I believe we're back to you, Mr. Waterman.
Good evening again. So tonight, before you for approval or denial is the DA for RRC Contractors, Inc. And Mr. McDonald's going to pull up the overhead here of this property. This is what I've always heard referred to and referred to myself as sort of the Norman Jeweler building and adjacent buildings as well. So one thing to draw your attention to, which is generally a component of all of these disposition and development agreements, is that we market these projects as being shovel ready for shovel work. And so at present, of course, there are no known issues. I believe there is potentially some environmental review being done on this project to see if there's been any contamination, but no known outstanding issues with that. In the event that there are some that may produce a future financial obligation, but at this point the sort of solidified consummated financial obligation is zero, but it is an ongoing obligation of this agreement, which is, like I said, standard. The project is a mixed-use development that will include approximately 15,721 square feet on 2 floors. Floors will include 4 spaces for retail use and a second floor, which will include 2 spaces for professional offices. And this should be attachment 3 to the DDA if you have that there in your packet. The description of this 2-story building, and it will have a basement. The basement will be used for building systems and vertical core. Level 1 will have 4 tenant spaces for retail building services and additional vertical core. Moving up to level 2, which has 2 tenant spaces for professional office building services, and then roof access. If you would like, we can go through. Rob, you can continue to scroll down. You can see the proposed improvement there, what that will look like. And Rob, I'll just let you sort of scroll at a reasonable rate through the remainder of those pictures. Well, that's it. That was a very reasonable rate. Well done. One thing to note in this, there were a couple blanks in the document that, in the event that it's approved tonight, we'll fill in. For the title report, the title company has this title report under file number 821380, and it is effective November 9th, 2022. So in the event this is approved, I will make sure that the chairman has those bits of information to include. Another thing to note that is true of this DDA, which is true in general of our disposition and development agreements, is that the ultimate sale price is derived by relying on a reuse appraisal that often produces a sale price of $0. Lastly, the schedule of performance calls for a start of construction in August of 2023, with pre-applications beginning in January, as well as exterior design being finalized in January, schematic design in March, planning applications in March, construction documents to the engineer in March and May, building permit application in May, and like I said, construction starting August of 2023 with a expected duration of 8 months. So that DDA is in front of you for approval tonight.
Questions?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I'm assuming it's our responsibility to demo the building that's there now.
Yes, I believe so. I'm not certain whether the exact scope of that will be, but the proposed project, does not incorporate the existing building there. Whether or not, what exactly that amount is, and how it's been accounted for budget-wise, I'd refer to Rochelle for that, but, that would be my understanding.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak to that. There is a budget for demolition of that building that is, about $100,000 that we earmarked specifically for that purpose.
Perfect, thank you.
Very good. Other questions? Doug, when we were first talking about their proposal, we had also seen a three-story proposal, or that was part of the talks, but at that time, we also had some talks about parking being a third story and then with residences up above. Has the parking consideration been taken out of this DDA? The promised parking spots?
There is no, to the extent that promised parking spots were a necessity by result of there being a proposed third floor for residential, which I do see here. It was, in Exhibit 3, you'll see a crossed out three-story proposal. To the extent that parking spots were a contingency of that, the residential component is now gone. And so, I am not aware of any parking spot promised, like we've seen with other developments based on residential use.
Okay, very good. Mr. Allgood?
Rob, could you pull up the ground floor again where it shows the, driveway there? Yeah. So previously, there were parking spaces included. You're making me car sick now.
Do you want this one or the,
Either way, they both show the same thing. Previously, there were parking spots in the middle of that, back where the utilities are between those two buildings. Does that make sense? There were some parking spaces. Am I thinking correctly?
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Allgood. Are you referring to parking spaces within the building here?
There was like an opening there at one point. There's not now, obviously, but, I thought at one point there was, but clearly there's not at this point.
To my knowledge, on this building, there was never proposed parking within the building footprint.
Okay.
I think the additional parking request was contingent on the third floor, and because that has been removed, my understanding is that there's not a request for city parking.
Okay.
It may be the case, Commissioner Allgood, that you're thinking of there was an iteration of Aztec Development's site plan that at least contemplated for some period of time, although I don't recall how much time, underground parking that would have had an access that would have shown parking within the floor plan. And so that may be it, but I'm not aware of that here with this building.
And we had lengthy discussion about residential and parking
Mhm.
on this situation. I was just putting the two together. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, before us is to approve or deny this DDA, and so I'll read the resolution. A resolution of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the execution of a development and disposition agreement with RRC Contractors Incorporated for the site located at Kimball and Blaine Street, 213 to 217 South Kimball Avenue in downtown Caldwell.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I move we accept that resolution.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Ms. Warwick. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Allgood. Any further discussion? Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Warwick,
Yes.
Commissioner Allgood,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Doty.
Yes.
Very good. That takes us to action item number 4, under old business, consider resolution approving the development and disposition agreement with Amano for property located at 516 Main Street in downtown Caldwell.
Right.
Mr. Waterman.
So Rob has pulled up the aerial. You can see 516 there. This agreement will be between the agency and Amano Development LLC. And Ann Kunkel is here tonight. She represents them also, and so I will keep it relatively brief. To allow her to extol the virtues of the project and also to make an ancillary request that she has brought with her tonight. as with the prior DDA, the obligation is that it be shovel-ready. Again, no known obligations, there's not anticipated unknown obligations, or environmental issues, that apply to this either. The project is a mixed-use development that will include approximately 1,500 square feet on the first floor and 6,000 on the second. The primary user on the first floor will be the Amana Restaurant, which you may be familiar with. They operate in downtown now at 702 Main Street. Additionally, the first floor will accommodate 3 spaces for complementary retail users and development of outdoor seating and dining areas along the 6th Street Plaza and Indian Creek frontages. The second floor will have office spaces for office use and a rooftop garden. And if you could pull up Exhibit 3, Attachment 3. There's some excellent renderings of the proposal. We'll come back to that in a moment. Ann Kunkel will make a request here in a moment, and I won't go too much into it, but there's a request that certain improvements to the right-of-way adjacent to the property off the Indian Creek side, on the other side, that those be eligible for reimbursement to help make sure those get accomplished in a way that's pleasing, and I'll let her go into that further and make that request. My understanding is that at this point, that request is, there may be some estimated dollar value associated with that, but that it is not currently within the contemplated budget set forth in the exhibit to the resolution that Rochelle will be presenting a little bit later. As with the prior project, this one will be disposed of through reuse appraisal, which often produces a sale value of $0. And then on the construction phasing, it appears that construction is targeted to commence in November of 2023, but that may be need to be updated by Ann as well. So here are the renderings of the proposed space. This is the view from Main Street. The view from Creekside. You see there on the bottom floor is the restaurant, some garden on top. The area to the northwest is 2 stories. That's where there'd be office space. Yep. Interior main entrance. I'll let you just scroll through the remainder at a reasonable rate, Rob. The bar. This is inside looking out onto the patio. And see the large sliding glass doors to create sort of an indoor-outdoor space. This is exterior. And same thing from a different angle. Now this is on the second floor. A little difficult to tell exactly which way this is looking direction-wise, but it appears that it's looking out over maybe the creek. And that's the last of them. So at this point, if there are any direct questions for me, I'm happy to answer them or do my best to do so. And then I'll turn it over to Ann if that's okay.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions for Doug? Okay, very good, thanks.
Thank you for your time, Commissioners. Again, Ann Kunkel with Farron Thomas. I thank you. That was an excellent description of the project. I think you guys have all seen the renderings. I don't need to walk you through those one more time. So really, 2 things that I wanted to make some clarifications. On the schedule of performance that was submitted, the phased construction was an error on my part, was a holdover. This is not intended to be a phased construction project. Once they start construction, they will commence through. Amana's lease is up in 2024, so they are vested and ready to move as soon as we can hopefully get a DDA signed. They've been in works with their lenders, so everyone is teed up to go once we have a DDA. So there shouldn't be any delay other than normal construction delays that we all experience. Again, this DDA does have the shovel-ready work and all of those language, but we've seen nothing that we have significant environmental concerns on that. The second request, and this is the second meeting I have attended virtually or in person in a row, and so I've heard the concerns of the treasurer and what is left in the coffers for the district. So our second request was, to the extent that right-of-way improvements needed to be included as part of this project, that would benefit the public and enhance the project overall, whether that be a widening of a sidewalk or doing right-of-way improvements on the creek side, that we would request that the agency consider reimbursement of some sort. Again, it's very clear that you guys are looking where you're going to spend your money, but we think that to the extent we need to put those as part of our project, we would ask the agency to share in some way of having reimbursement for those right-of-way improvements. We currently don't have a cost. I'm speaking with Mr. Hilty. There's a variety of things we would consider, splitting it, putting caps on those costs, but really just a request of the agency to see if there's any possibility that, to the extent we need to put in those improvements for the betterment of the project and the betterment of the public, we could possibly have participation from the agency.
Thank you, Ann.
Sure.
Mr. Doty?
So, Ms. Conkle, this isn't directed right at you, but my frustration with this already is that you got the land for free, right? And I know our attorney doesn't like it when I say that, but you didn't pay any money for the land. And now you want even more money for some improvements if that happens. So just to be upfront, so I wouldn't be in favor of providing any more money. So you already get the land for free, and let's hope it works out for you in the end, so.
Other comments or questions? Mr. August?
Thank you, I'm sorry. Has Amano identified a general contractor yet? Are they, in our notes it said they had not. I didn't know whether they had that set up or not.
They don't. They've been in contact with a couple of general contractors to see what participation can look like in the project for that, but as of today, they have not identified a general contractor, at least to my knowledge.
Oh, yeah, and that's just getting done by 2024, they're on a tight timeline, it would seem, but anyway, thank you.
And they are aware. Amano is quite aware of that, and they have been in communication, so these wouldn't be cold calls, if you will, to contractors, as if the CDA is approved by the agency.
Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Moore?
So we have no bid, we have no numbers, nothing right now on those additional improvements?
Correct. Yeah, this would be a forward-looking, and that is why, to the extent, and I understand the commissioner's position on getting the land for free, this would be to the extent that these right-of-way improvements were identified as being needed as part of the project and in the public right-of-way as construction commences. And I think for the Amano folks, like, their particular concern is what if we have to widen the sidewalk or bring something into code for our right-of-way that benefits the project but also benefits the community as a whole and the Creekside and this project.
I don't think there's enough information to gather to come up with any kind of decision on that at this point.
That's understood.
Well, it's on us to approve or deny this resolution, and I'll read it into the record here. A resolution of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the execution of a development and disposition agreement with Amano Developments LLC for the site located at 516 Main Street in downtown Caldwell. Mr. Waterman, do you need to speak again?
Yes, one additional comment. The draft DDA has the language about the reimbursement included in it. And so if you approve the resolution tonight, it'll be necessary to identify into the record that you're approving a version of it with the language on right-of-way improvement reimbursement being excluded. If you want to include it, you can adopt the resolution either with the DDA as drafted, or we can talk about putting in some sort of cap or cost share or something like that. But as drafted, if you simply approve the resolution, it will include uncapped reimbursement of those costs.
Thanks for that clarification. That's important. Okay, what is the disposition of the commissioners?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I move we accept the DDA excluding shared costs for improvements. We have to make final decisions tonight based upon how much money we're spending. We don't have any way to include anything like that. after today, so we can't, you know, and I'm sure that the city will work with any project like that. You know, and if it benefits the public, I'm sure a case can be made at that point, but at this point, I would move to approve it without that cost reimbursement.
Very good. We have a motion by Ms. Warwick. Second by Mr. Doty. Any further conversation, questions? With the Mr. Alden.
I just wanted to say, Ms. Conklin, this is a really good-looking building, though.
Beautiful.
It's gonna be so exciting down there. I'm really happy to see Amano do it. Yeah, I'm very happy with the project.
It is.
Good one.
Excellent. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Warwick,
Yes.
Commissioner Aldred,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Doty.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Ann. Really appreciate your comments, and thanks for being here tonight. This takes us to our Economic Development Activity Report with Steve Jenkins. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Appreciate you having me this evening. I'll be brief because I know we have a lot on the agenda to cover, but as I typically do, I'll start off with miscellaneous updates. I'll start off initially with Federated Ordnance. I had a chance to tour the building. Gosh, that was a few weeks ago. Equipment's coming in, and they are looking at starting their production line here soon. So first of the year, you should start seeing some activity from the employee standpoint on that Federated Ordnance building in Sky Ranch. Phelan Development, they were planning to break ground this month, and it doesn't look like they're going to make it there. They'll probably look at Q1 of next year is where they're at, but plans are still underway for that development to occur. They just had a couple of hiccups in the development process, but they're well on their way, and you'll see some buildings going up there soon. This site is on Highway 2026 at Smead Parkway. And then update on Idaho Power. This was left in here erroneously, but I'll provide a quick update since it's here in front of me. They are looking at a lot line adjustment with Canyon County right now, so things are still well underway on that site. They do have it under contract in the North Caldwell area, so good things ahead for Idaho Power and a future substation location there. And then just shifting gears a little bit, Project Greenbrier. This is a national fast casual chain, and they're interested in Caldwell, East Caldwell specifically. I had a chance to meet with their team recently. They're in discussions with 2 property owners on some potential locations in East Caldwell. So very hopeful for them to find a site that they move forward with. And then Project Spartan. This is a 40,000 square foot build-to-suit project for an out-of-state tenant. Build-to-suit is when the developer will come in and build on behalf of a tenant that they're going to build, that they're working with. So in this case, we have a group from out of state. They're working on a 2-acre parcel in Sky Ranch. They do have that site under contract. And this project will create about 20 to 25 new jobs. And then Project Port, this is a national company looking to occupy about 5,000 to 10,000 square feet in the near future. They're a supplier that sees a need to help support some of the businesses that currently operate in Sky Ranch. So seem to be a really good fit for what they do as a company and some of the business groups that make up the business park, which is really what we envisioned as a whole as it relates to urban renewal. And then Patainer. Patainer is a group that is a national operator. They're a manufacturer. We love manufacturers here because manufacturers, they have expensive equipment that go into buildings. They also create some high-tech jobs. So very long-standing companies that allow us to diversify our economy. Patainer is one that was a national group that really we were competing for. So this is a lead from BVEP, and they are leasing a 5,000 square foot building in an industrial way business park. So just south of Sky Ranch. And then Project Hard, this is a big box looking for space in East Caldwell. They did have a site that they had identified. That site actually fell through, so we're hopeful that they'll find another one in the near future, but this is for a 100,000 square foot retail store. And then LPC West, for those that could attend, that was a great event. That was a 396,000 square foot project between 2 buildings. They're working with a prospect to take the large building and then some other small ones to occupy the rest of the space as well. But that's a great project, and I get the fortunate pleasure of driving by the construction each day on my way into the airport. So really appreciate seeing that site moving after so long. And then Project Trailblazer, this is the BVEP lead. They already visited Caldwell once. They're looking to come back in February of 2023. So hopeful to land that project. That was a BVEP lead. And then just shifting into North Caldwell, Project 26. We continue to work with the developers on a large site on Highway 2026. They're gearing up for construction in Q3 of 2023. And then Project P&W, this project is currently on hold. We're still working through infrastructure concerns for the company, and we'll proceed with our objectives and goals for the region. And then Project Natural, this group is actually looking to visit in early January, and they are looking for a 40-acre site in North Caldwell. They're a national manufacturer as well, so coming with a slew of jobs and some opportunities there. So the good thing is we have adequate industrial land available in North Caldwell, which has been a key target area for us in terms of incentivizing developments to come into the area. And in Project Grizzly, this is a commercial project that we've been working on for, almost a year now. They are still moving forward. They're excited about their future in Caldwell, so things are still progressing there. And then annexation, that one is moving. Of course, we have plans to get in front of City Council, I think on December 20th, but things are underway for that to occur for some of the properties in North Caldwell. And then just going downtown real briefly, 613 Main Street is under contract with a developer out of Ada County. We're working closely with this group. We actually have a meeting with them later this week. They're planning to bring a unique and engaging concept to downtown Caldwell. We're hopeful that things work out there, but that would bring new life into a building that has some, not necessarily historic value per se, but it's an old building, so we like to see those old buildings brought up to speed and brought up to code and everything else. TS Development, this is the group that won the RFP at 510 Arthur Street. Working closely with them, they're already engaging with some prospects, which is a great sign to see, outside of Skyvino, which of course they have a signed LOI for that restaurant space. But as it relates to the residential space in the project, they have engaged with some folks that have an interest in some condominium space downtown. Then RRC Contractors, Douglas Waterman talked a little bit about this project, and of course the DDA was just approved. They have a Boise-based restaurant that they've been working closely with that will occupy the first floor, and then they have 2 large office users on the second floor. So Derek Cooper's with RRC Contractors. He's already working hard to secure quality users that will bring some great entertainment options to downtown Caldwell, which is exciting to see, and office users, of course. Project Italy, this is a restaurant group considering downtown Caldwell. They're interested in multiple sites that may fit their brand. And then lastly, Project Lone Star, they're back in the mix after a brief hiatus. They'll be visiting Caldwell, downtown Caldwell in January to look at additional sites for future restaurant space. And with that, Chairman, Commissioners, that is my report, unless there are any questions for me.
Any questions for Steve?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
So, good job. That's a lot of business. What's the common denominator in a raising rate environment right now? Things that are going up, commercial and residential, but commercial. What's the common denominator? What's bringing that here?
Great question, Chairman, Commissioner Moore. Thank you for that question. Really appreciate your insights there, especially from your financial background. I would say that it's largely predicated on our growth from our population standpoint. Of course, commodities are still selling. You know, retail users, commercial users are still looking for opportunities to expand and grow. That hasn't quite slowed down yet. I would say from the residential standpoint, we are seeing a little bit of a shift from that degree. But what we do have is we have these pending projects that are underway that's allowing for these retail commercial users to see that there are some bright things ahead, bright signs ahead for growth and continuation of growth. And the patterns that they're seeing now are going to continue into the future. So that's been a good sign. But as it relates to just our local operators, I mean, they've had some of the best years on record these past few years, and their demand is really taking off quite well. So we are seeing those groups that are based here in Idaho that are looking to grow in markets like Caldwell.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job.
Other comments or questions? Steve, I just wanted to say thank you. It was just a month ago you came to Urban Renewal asking for us to buy the 613 Main. And I appreciate the fact that you didn't get discouraged over our no, but you went, and now there's a buyer for the property and a developer that's going to come in. So good for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman. Really appreciate your support and the Commissioner's support here. Totally understand the scenario that you guys are up against, and we just try to hope for the best. We want the best outcome for downtown. That's all we're here for, and I'm glad that there's a quality group that is considering the building now.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. This brings us to item number 6 under our old business. Report from Ophelia Morales.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll keep mine even briefer than Stephen's. So here are my downtown updates. Project Care, this is just an update on this project. Business offering service to families. They are scheduled to close December 15th. So hopefully at my next meeting, I'll be able to provide you a name for that business. Project Native, new startup business seeking space in downtown, and they've actually identified a space. So if you follow us on Facebook or economic page, we'll make an announcement there, hopefully this month. Project East, well-established local franchise restaurant business, does not have a presence in Canyon County, is seeking space in Canyon County, and hopefully we will be the first space in Canyon County for them. And this is geared towards family casual. Project Strong, local retail business that's seeking other location options that are closer to the plaza. Project Dual, local retail business seeking to expand in a larger space and is open to space in downtown Caldwell. It's a well-established business. Just some business updates. Small Business Saturdays, some businesses reported that they had an increase in terms of folks walking through their doors. However, the spending wasn't as much as previous years, and they're thinking that's due to a lot of media just saying hold your money a little tighter. You know, we're unsure what's happening with this economy. Winter Wonderland business impacted restaurants have shared that during the weekends they are pretty packed. During the weekdays, a little bit different on that. So if you are able to support our local businesses, please do so. And then some business that are opening in December. We have 2 beauty salons, one on 901 Main Street that's opening up this month, and one on Kimball inside the Mike Muscle building. And an invitation, and then lastly, I want to invite you all to the Craft Lounge soft opening. This will be a private event for you all to attend. This will be on the 14th at 4 p.m. They will do their soft opening this Saturday and their grand opening New Year's Eve. So I am happy to forward you all that invitation. I forwarded it to a few, and Nick, the owner, mentioned that he should share that with City Council folks already as well. So we hope to see you there. And I stand for any questions.
Very good. Any questions for Ophelia? Very good, thanks.
Thank you.
That concludes our old business, brings us to the new business, and the first action item is to consider Resolution 2022-55, authorizing the finalization of funding encumbrances for the closure of the Caldwell East Urban Renewal Agency allocation area.
Hello again, Commissioners. So this resolution is the finalization of the East Urban Renewal area, and it will solidify funding received over the next fiscal year to projects that we have identified here on this list. So if you guys had a copy of the packet, I was going to have him pull up a spreadsheet of it. But if you have a copy of it in the packet, it should be in there. And there's 2 columns that I kind of wanted to review with you in relation to what we're asking of you tonight. The first column, well, can you get it? Yeah, there it goes. Okay. So the first column is the amount budgeted for the project. Some of these projects are already underway. The second column, which is the remaining, those are remaining funds that we will need to complete the projects that are listed. And the final column is the unobligated column. These are the amounts of the projects listed that have not yet been officially approved by the Urban Renewal Agency, and that is what we are looking for you to approve tonight. If the amount is listed in the remaining column and not in the unobligated column, that means you have already approved it as an agency by a resolution. So in the unobligated by a contract, anything that is highlighted there in gray is a resolution item that was also presented tonight, except for the Lions Park irrigation project, which was removed. And so those amounts that are highlighted in gray correlate to the amount that we are asking for approval on the resolution. As you can see on there, we also have that $100,000 in there that we just referred to for the Norman's project that is to be approved. We have 3.2 million for the Plaza Extension Festive Street. That's the one that came in much higher than we expected on the bid. And then we have some additional funds, left for the cleanup of the Bennett site, if there's any, remediation that might come needed of that site prior to development. We've also got an amount for the Vineyard Public Space, which is improving that area, which we've talked about in the past. We have the Lubby Park irrigation system at $300,000, the TVCC remodel, an amount remaining of $965,000. We have the underground power for the alley, U-stick widening. We decided to continue to include the Woodfield hitting facility. We felt that that was a small enough project and one that would benefit the city overall. One of the projects that we did cut from the previous project listing that we gave you was the Woodfield parking areas. So we decided to go away with that and potentially try some other methods of providing parking out there, maybe not paving the whole thing and potentially going to the city for funding on that. And then we also felt that the foundation, the project for the Rice House Foundation was an important piece of history for the city to maintain, and we thought it would be great to be able to repurpose that. And so we did throw that. That is also an item, and I believe it's the next action item listed here for the Rice House move. And with that, I will stand for questions. We're asking for a total tonight to be approved of $9,068,836.78 to encumber the remaining funds.
Thanks, Rochelle. Mr. Waterman, can I ask a question? Could we table this particular matter for the time being and revisit it a little bit later after we've addressed some of the questions that are gonna come up with things that we took off the consent calendar?
Mr. Chair, that's a perfectly fine thing to do. That does make sense that way. That will help populate this table, and potentially create gaps if something is not approved. Rochelle, do you have any thought on doing it in that direction?
Are you wanting to table it, like talk about these resolutions tonight and then come back to this tonight? Is that
Yes.
what you're referring to? Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's good, because it'll give them a little bit more detail on the projects that have already,
Absolutely, and I think that's,
in the
we're looking
resolution.
for clarity
Yeah,
and
yeah.
specificity, and I know you're not feeling well, so
Yeah.
we'll try to be as efficient as we can be.
Yeah, and Rob can help with a lot of those resolutions for projects that have come through, so that will take care of a lot of these ones that are highlighted in the gray area.
Very
So
good.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
Great, thanks, Rochelle.
Mhm.
Chair, I just have one question.
Sure, Mr. Doty.
I've got some notes written here from earlier, so are we, the Plaza extension there, or the, I think it's called, what did we say, the Arthur Downtown, the Plaza extension Festive Street, are we keeping that in, or did it come out? I thought I had some
No,
notes
that-
it's out.
That's in. I mean, that's currently in. We're asking, for you guys to, it was already in there. The price just jumped up. So it's been on the list for quite some time. It's always been, a main focus. I think we, did have a few smaller resolutions come in for preliminary work that had to be done on it. And so the Urban Renewal Agency, if you notice there that the budget is 3.2 and 3.277 and the remaining is 3.251. So, there's been some small costs generated on that as we're trying to get that project underway. We were finally able to get an actual bid back recently this week for final costs. So, that is one that we currently are asking you to fund tonight.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. August.
Just to clarify, that project doubled in price?
More than, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of surprises me some.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for clarification's sake, we had earmarked $1 million for this project probably 2 years ago. And what happens is, with the way the market's gone, we didn't know exactly what the project was gonna cost. And so until we get an engineer to start designing it and an architect to lay it all out, it's really just a shot in the dark. We don't know what all the amenities are and what all the implications are. Once they get a design put together, then they can give us an estimate, an engineer's estimate of what the cost will be. And so that's where we just barely got to that point last week, and I've been applying a lot of pressure on these guys to get us a number so that we can put something into our budget. And so what we have received is an estimate from the architect and the engineer on the estimated cost of construction of the project. What I have seen happen more than not is that they will give us a high number because they don't want the bids to go out and bids to come in higher than what they estimated. And so there probably is some wiggle room in this number, and there's chances that the number may come down a little bit once the design is actually finalized and we put it out to bid. On some of the other projects that we've bid out recently, bids have actually been more competitive. And for example, the 602 Cleveland project, we received 6 bids on that. And some of the contractors were lamenting on trying to find work and how many contractors were bidding on the project. And so that's an encouraging sight. In the past, many times we've only received 1 bid or maybe 2. And so what you're looking at here, it's not that the cost of the project went up 3 times. It's that our initial number that was 2 years old was just a guess or more of a placeholder. And now that we're actually getting design done, we know what the project's actually going to cost. Or we have an estimate of what it's going to cost.
So am I reading this right, that the project would cost $6 million?
No, it's 3 million.
The total cost is $3 million?
Yes.
Okay, that's better. Still not good, but better.
Okay, very good. We'll call you back a little bit later. Thanks, Rochelle. And this will move us up to our action item number 2 of new business, to consider a request from the Caldwell Housing Authority for the appropriation of funding in the amount of $154,200 for air rights sites, both on Kimball and on Albany. So this is more than just moving the Rice House. It's also for some infrastructure there on a 6-plex on Albany Street for affordable housing according to Idaho Code 50-2007. We heard this presented.
Yeah.
This was presented by Mike.
Is this one of the pending requests? Right
Yes.
now?
It's up there. It's up there.
Yeah, so it's in the final number.
Mr. Waterman.
Commissioner, if you've already heard the request, then I don't have really anything to add. Mr. Dittenberg's here, and he can, I think, fill in more information than I'd be able to. One note, if you do authorize this, we would tweak the resolution slightly to cite a different section of the Idaho Code Title 50, Chapter 20 and 29, and the plan. The code site section that is cited refers to air rights, and the exact application of that idea to this is a little unclear. But anyway, there are better homes for it, both in the code and in the plan, so we would want to tweak that before anything was signed in terms of a resolution. But other than that, I think it sounds like you already have all the information about it and know what the proposal is, and it's ultimately your decision.
Very good.
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I just
Ms.
ask for a definition for air rights sites?
Sure. Would you like it from Mr. Waterman or from Mr. Dittenberg?
From anybody that wants to
From
give it
Mr.
to me.
Dibbar. Can we get it from Mr. Dibbar?
So, Commission, here, air rights have been discussed in Idaho's urban renewal law since its beginning. And I think that likely the reason that is the case is because some legislator copied and pasted our urban renewal law from somewhere back east. That'd be my guess. When I think of air rights, what I think of is a historical building you cannot move, and you're going to build a skyscraper on top of it. And so you construct foundations and footings that allow you to leave it in place like a little piece of a Rubik's Cube in the corner, and then construct as if it were not there and incorporate it into that. I think that is likely what air rights means. But we have lots of air here in Idaho and very rarely need to spend money to utilize the rights to that. So I don't think I've ever seen a project that I thought really amounted to that. But like I said, it's there are better homes just in terms of better homes for this in terms of historic preservation and redevelopment and addressing blighted areas that both the urban renewal law and our plan contemplate, so.
Any other questions? Mike, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Any questions for Mr. Dittenber?
Yeah, I have a whole bunch.
Mr. Allgood?
I just like to hear Mike talk.
I object.
So I think, I have a small slide.
He came prepared.
Yeah.
I just have two slides like 8 and 11, I think, 8 and 11. So, my name is Mike Dittenber. I'm the director of the Caldwell Housing Authority. My address is, 22730 Farmway Road. Mr. Waterman is correct that maybe there's a little bit of ambiguity in the, Idaho code with regards to urban renewal, but he should also know that there's this great debate amongst legal scholars nationwide about what the Supreme Court is doing. They're not guessing what people said. They're taking what was literally written in the code. And so I kind of take that legal stand. It was written in the code. It talks about air rights, but I think we're talking about the same thing. It's basically what they wanted to make sure happened was that a foundation was built and put in place for something to go above it that had some sort of a value down the road or some sort of value to the Urban Renewal Agency down the road. So we're talking about two different properties, a property on the corner of Kimball and Chicago and a property at 909 Albany. The Housing Authority from time to time has transferred properties that are tax deeded from the county, and they're in pretty rough shape. And so we try to clean those titles up to those properties. We try to make a bare piece of ground, a lot like the Urban Renewal Agency does. And for a long time, we've been contemplating what we put on those properties downtown. And so we would like to put something affordable, something that's a dwelling unit of sorts that we can provide at an affordable rate to our community. In looking at that area, both Albany and Kimball and Chicago are on the north end. We've kind of had 20 years of plaza myopia, and so it's now, I'm now asking for a little bit to take our efforts across the track and build something affordable and appealing to the eye on both Kimball and Chicago and Albany. So if you take a look at, I think it's, thumb through this real quick, you know. So here's the Rice House. We believe that with the proper basement, that we can probably get 6 to 8 units out of that, transfer it downtown, make kind of a micro living arrangement where we can get it. That's what it looked like in its glory days when it was on 16th and Cleveland. This is what it looks like kind of now. There's our lot on the corner of Kimball and Chicago. There's the aerial view of it. We don't have the nice stuff like the city does, so we just take a Google map shot. And then here's the property on 909 Albany. And it's a very small lot. I think it's around 60 feet wide by 150 deep, a narrow lot. But this is what we're looking at building on Albany. So the Rice House is what it is. This is what we're looking at building on Albany. It'll give us a total of 12 affordable units in downtown Caldwell. When we start talking about the arrangement that we would make with the Urban Renewal Agency, and that is that these 12 units would be made available first to public safety personnel who need affordable places to live. In addition to that, the north end could probably use some public safety personnel living in the north end. And so, all in all, it's a good thing. I'm telling you, it's a good thing. But anyway, in short, that's what we're looking at doing, relocating the Rice House down to Kimball and Chicago and developing a sixplex on that lot on Albany.
Questions? Mr. Allgood?
Well, maybe you presented this at a meeting I wasn't at. I missed the last meeting, so that's very possible. So I did, when I was seeing the Rice House situation, I was unaware that you were talking about moving the house from over on 20th or College, whichever that.
Correct.
Over here. So that's the idea, is moving that old house, which, is that a historical house?
It is. It's one of 7 buildings in Caldwell that's on the National Registry of Historic Places.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the other thing I'm aware of, so, all right, that was basically, that cleared it up a little bit for me,
Great.
thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Mr. Dittenberg? Very good, thank you. Discussion? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Doty?
say that we approve the request from Caldwell Housing Authority for the appropriation of funding in the amount of $154,200 for the air rights sites at 321 Kimball Avenue and 909 Albany Avenue.
Very good. We have a motion by Mr.
Second.
And I just want to make clear with the code, did you want me to make sure we get the code in there? It'll be 502029? Was that important to get in there or not?
I think if your motion is just to make sure that whatever to have
Appropriate code
legal
is.
counsel review any sort of actual contractual document, that'll be sufficient.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Doty. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Warwick. Any further discussion? Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Allgood?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes. Very good. This brings us to action item number 3, to consider invoices for payment from the Urban Renewal Agency Treasurer.
Invoices presented for payment tonight totals the amount of $231,074.46. Mostly monthly operating costs and DeChase payment, some payments to Canyon County for the Fair Expo site improvements. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Rochelle? Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Warwick. We have a second? Second by Mr. Doty. Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Allgood?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Very good. Rochelle, we're going to give you a little bit of break, and we're going to go to the things that we took off the consent calendar earlier. And so we move to what had appeared as item number 2, and that's to approve a resolution accepting the notice of award to Central Paving for the 2022 Ustick Road roundabout projects. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. Item number 2 is regarding 2 roundabouts that are located on Ustick Road at Florida and Indiana. Indiana is currently already constructed as a single-lane roundabout, so this project would be expanding the Indiana and Ustick roundabout. And in addition to that, it would be completing the frontage along the entire northeast corner, which is the park, from the new parking lot that was constructed all the way down to the corner, and then all the way east to the edge of the park property, and the northwest corner from the YMCA all the way around the corner to the Heritage Community Charter School. As those other corners develop, they are going to have obligations to reimburse the city through their development agreements for frontage that was constructed by the city, and that language is being put into those development agreements as that northwest corner, the southwest corner just came through recently, and when the southeast corner decides to come through. So we will get some compensation back for that project. The Urban Renewal Agency allocation area follows Ustick Road on the south right-of-way line, which is 40 feet south of the center line of Ustick Road through this entire area. So the entire roundabout project cannot be covered by Urban Renewal because it's not entirely in the Urban Renewal area. And so what we did here was we selected some funding from Urban Renewal to cover a portion of the roundabout, and then the remainder of the roundabout costs will be covered by the city. And that would come out of the street, the street department fund balance. And we have we've been talking with the Public Works Director and with Finance to figure out exactly how that works, and we are confident that that's something that we are able to do. We have received, over time, we have had many complaints about the Florida and Ustick intersection and the safety issues that we've had out there. And more recently, the Indiana and Ustick intersection has reached capacity with the amount of traffic we have. And so both of these projects were bid out together, under one contract. We received bids back, just a little over a week ago, for the entire project at $4.9 million. The urban renewal portion of that is $2.1 million that we are requesting. That is 1.6 for the Florida intersection, and then another 500,000 for the Indiana intersection. And I think that covers most of the details. I'm happy to answer any questions about this item.
Questions? Rob, this has been on the project list for quite a while, and the numbers that have been requested from the agency haven't really changed at all, have they?
That is correct. I will note that the Florida and Ustick roundabout was supposed to be built in 2015, and that one has been pushed back continually. Indiana and Ustick was constructed with those grass areas between the back of curb and the sidewalk with anticipation that someday it would be expanded, and that's exactly what we are planning to do. And I will note too that the project will happen for both of those roundabouts this year. The Indiana and Ustick roundabout has to be done while school is out because of the proximity to Caldwell High School. And the Florida roundabout can be done a little bit before or a little bit after, depending on how the contractor wants to phase it, but we will be monitoring that closely and working with the school district to make sure that we're not causing any issues with that construction.
Okay, questions for Rob on this one? And all of those numbers are reflected on the presentation we're looking at there?
Yes, that is correct. And
Okay.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it's, sorry, I can't see that well, so. There's a line item for 500,000. That is for the Florida, Indiana and Ustick. So there's the 500,000 right there for Indiana and Ustick, and then the 1.6 million is right here. So that's the 2.1 million that is requested from Urban Renewal for the project.
All right. Any questions for Rob?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moore?
Question for Rob. Rob, you said something about reimbursements from who?
So we have been, as the properties around the Indiana and Ustick roundabout develop, we have been requesting that, we've been obligating in their development agreements through the engineering comments that frontage portions that are being constructed by the city for that roundabout, that the cost of that, what they would have spent on their frontage improvements would be contributed to the city for that, for participation basically in the roundabout. They would have been obligated to build their full corner, but because we happen to be doing a roundabout at about the same time as two of those corners are developing, then we felt it justified that their contribution that they would have normally been required to do would go toward the construction of the roundabout.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's before my time.
Any other questions? Very good. Thanks, Rob. I will read this resolution. We'll just be taking them one at a time, I believe. It says, be it hereby resolved by the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency that the commission of said agency hereby accepts a bid proposal from Central Paving Company in the amount of $4,941,040.57, of which Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency is obligated to pay $2,100,000.00, and hereby authorizes the city engineer to issue a notice of award to Central Paving Company Incorporated and process all necessary contract documents for the 2022 Ustick Road roundabouts, Ustick in Florida and Ustick in Indiana.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Allgood?
I move that we approve that request.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further comments, questions? Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Allgood?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Very good. This takes us to, what had been item number 3 on the consent calendar. It's to approve resolution accepting the notice of award to Idaho Siteworks for the Centennial Way Median Inlay and Beautification Project in the amount of $689,573.78, and authorizing the city engineer to execute all necessary documents for said project. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 3 is regarding Centennial Way, and what it is proposing is to remove all of the landscaping. There are three island sections along Centennial Way between Simplot Boulevard and the interstate. It would remove all the landscaping throughout. It would pave closed with decorative colored concrete all of those island spaces. It would install new tree vaults, and there would be a handful of new trees installed that would meet the classification that ITD would like to see. It would also include new power runs through the site and irrigation in as much as that the trees need irrigated. This project went out to bid recently through formal bid process, and 2 bids were received, and they were both within $10,000 of each other. This was the lower bid. And so it appears that at least the bidders are on the same page, and it appears that it's probably an accurate bid if they were that close. It was a little higher than we had hoped, but it's kind of the same thing where we don't know exactly what the bid's going to come in at until we get a design done, and oftentimes until we go out to bid and actually get numbers. And so this is what the number came in at. The reason why this project has become somewhat of a priority is because for years, the Parks Department has had to maintain this center median, and there have been many concerns about safety as they go out there and try to pull weeds and maintain all the shrubs that have been out there. And so for that reason, late last year, a year and a half ago, Mayor Nancolas at the time recommended that we do try to push this project forward so that we can minimize to a great extent the amount of time the Parks Department has to spend out on that median, where you have that 2-lane traffic in each direction and moving at a fairly high velocity. This project, again, was bid out, and so this is an actual bid, and construction would start. They have, I think, a 90-day construction window, if this is approved, for construction to be started and completed. And one other thing that has increased the price on this is there's a lot of traffic control and a lot of coordination with the state, because Centennial is a state route. It is not a city road. But the state does not deal with landscaping or medians or anything that has anything to do with beautification generally. And so that is why this would fall on the city's responsibility, or the city's, basically a city obligation to do this work and to maintain any landscaping that we have there.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Moore?
Rob, isn't this a city street department project? Wouldn't it be, I just kind of thinking here.
Commissioner Moore, that's a great question. The street department typically deals with street maintenance of asphalt. Our street department is not capable of pouring concrete. We don't have staff on hand that is expert in concrete pouring, especially decorative concrete that may be colored and things. This is more of a kind of a specialty type project. There are portions that maybe could be done by the street department, but recently, over the last couple of years, we've really struggled to get them to be able to come do any type of special project because they've been so short on labor and positions filled. So over the last couple of years, the only way to really get things done in a timely manner has been to put it out to bid and have a contractor come do the work.
Any other questions? Okay, I will read the resolution, and we will decide what to do. Approve resolution accepting the notice of award for Idaho Siteworks to complete the Centennial Way Median Inlay and Beautification Project for the amount of $689,573.78, and authorizes the city engineer to execute the agreement for said project. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
because I think it's a safety issue for city personnel to be out there working. I drive that road every day. People are crazy. I move that we accept it.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Warwick,
Second?
second by Mr. Doty. Any further comment or question?
I have
Mr.
just a
Allgood?
comment. I totally believe in the project, absolutely accurate. Cars that drive through there are just crazy. I just don't see it as an urban renewal project. I don't think it falls under urban renewal money. Like I said, I totally agree that it needs to be done. I disagree that it's urban renewal money that needs to do that, is my thought.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Moore?
I would second what, was just said. I drive through there and I know there's been several circumstances where people have hit those trees. I know there was a young man that was killed there, hit a tree. Yeah, it's a dangerous thing. I just don't think it's a URA project.
Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I forgot to mention that we had originally anticipated that this would be fully covered by urban renewal, but as we went through our budget meetings more recently, we did split it. So the intent would be that urban renewal would be covering half of the cost, and then the city would be covering the other half, is what we were shooting for. So I don't know if that has any bearing on the decision. I wanted to point that out.
Mr. Chairman, what would that number be?
So half of the 689,000 is what you're looking at a
Correct. So if you look up there, the portion that would be covered by urban renewal is for.
359?
Oh, 359, okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So the request is 359, 365.78.
Mr. Chairman, I got 344,786.
We didn't split it exactly in half. We just said about 305,000, kind of rounded out, you know.
Does the agenda need modified then, so that we keep this clear, or just the motion with the change or the modification?
Would you like to retract your original motion and rephrase it,
I can
Ms. Warwick?
certainly amend my original motion.
But, hang on for just a second.
Yep.
I'd just like to hear from, if he's willing, Commissioner Allgood, to see what he thinks about now, what his thoughts are.
Well, it is some better. It doesn't, like I said, I struggle with that. I do see it as a priority. I mean, I see it as something where it's dangerous out there. I could probably live with that. I mean, it's still not appealing to me, but it needs to be done.
Mr. Moore, any further
Well,
comments?
I think just, there's, $10 million in reserves in the city street department. I think this is a city street department project.
Ms. Warwick?
I would amend my motion to approve spending the $359,365.78 toward the improvements on Centennial Way.
Mr. Waterman, do you want to chime in here?
Sorry, I was about to cough. I was gonna turn off my mic, and that's why I touched it.
That's very kind of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Doty, is that amendment
Yes, I'll
okay with you?
second. Yep.
Okay, all right. Any last minute comments? All right, would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Warwick,
Yes.
Commissioner Allgood,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
No.
Commissioner Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Doty.
Yes.
Takes us to item number 4 from the old consent calendar. It's to approve resolution accepting the notice of award to Clearwater Landscape for the 21st Avenue parking lot project, irrigation system and landscaping in the amount of $288,539 and authorizing the city engineer to execute all necessary documents for said project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 21st Avenue parking lot, I think we are all familiar with. This project was initially generated by one of my project engineers, and in the beginning of the project, I'm not exactly sure why he had split out all the different components to bid them out separately. And so in putting this project together, we have had to, do some change orders and amendments to try to get everything back together. And now everything's been complete. The only remaining component of this project is the irrigation and the landscaping. And then the street lights, which is something that the street department, has already done quite a bit of work on and will be finishing. This project, was initially, has been in the works for quite a while. The budget to include this irrigation and landscaping, I should say the estimate that we've been using has been in place for quite some time, and so this expense is no surprise to the city, or to the engineering department at least. This project went out to bid. There were 3 bids received. This was the low bid by probably $100,000. The other 2 bids were quite a bit higher. This contractor has done a lot of work in the city, and I think they were familiar and comfortable with the project, which is why we got the bid we did. And so this is kind of the last step to be able to finish this parking lot so that come next spring, we have it all landscaped and ready to go.
Okay. Any questions on this matter for Rob? I will read the resolution then. Approve resolution approving of the notice of award for Clearwater Landscape to complete the 21st Avenue parking lot irrigation system and landscaping for the amount of $288,539, and authorizes the city engineer to execute the agreement for said work. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I just have some questions.
Mr. Doty?
So if this isn't approved, could it come out of the 10 million from the street department? It sounds like that we have in reserves. Would that be a same concern as the last project, or is this one?
This one is, the way I see it, is all part of the bigger project with the fairgrounds and the paving. As Mr. McDonald said, it was split out, but it was all intended to be one piece. And I'm fine with that, as that whole project with the fairgrounds and the additional parking for the fairgrounds, et cetera.
Okay, other comments? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody off.
And I would just mention, on top of that, it's probably not appropriate for this to be funded out of the street department, simply because it has to do with irrigation and landscaping, which is not something that the street department typically deals with.
Yeah.
I believe we had a motion and a second. Would the secretary call the roll? I don't know.
I don't think we
I
did.
thought I did.
No, we didn't do a motion on this one.
Well, let's go back and do that.
Do that.
Yeah, let's make sure we do it right.
All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Chris. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Allgood, a second by Ms. Warwick. Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Allgood?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. This brings us to item number 5 from the consent calendar that we have moved into new business. It's to approve a resolution accepting the notice of award to Clearwater Landscape.
This one's the one that's been pulled.
Yeah, we'll have Rob speak to that. I mean, this ought to give us all a sigh of relief in the midst of all this. Notice of award to Clearwater Landscape for the pressure irrigation system for the east side of Lions Park in the amount of $97,571, and authorizing the city engineer to execute all necessary documents for said project.
Thank you.
What's up with this, Rob?
Mr. Chair.
Why are you pulling it?
We have, because of this, the way this project came, it was originally scoped as it was a larger project because we had 2 different sides of the park, as you know. Before we brought it to Urban Renewal last month, we decided to pare that down. There was plans to not provide pressure irrigation to the west side of the park because maybe the city had other plans to use that or to get rid of that project. Or property, I should say. And so we were left with a project for $97,000 to do the existing side of the park. We feel like at this time that should not be covered under urban renewal, and that we are fairly confident we can find funding through the city, either the Parks Department or revenue generated from surplus property of a portion of the park, or something to that effect, to be able to cover the cost of this. And so we're requesting to pull it off the agenda.
Okay. Just question, what were some of your discussions, did Mr. Moore's concern come up at all about the height of the courts and things like that? Was that discussed?
Yeah, we did discuss that a little bit. The question, the park, I mean, overall, the park needs quite a bit of rehab. And if the basketball courts were set a little bit low, that would be something that, may be part of the rehab that would come to the park. The pressure irrigation may help so that there's not overwatering on the basketball courts. I personally, don't play basketball there a lot. I know, Commissioner Moore, you're familiar with the park, and so we may, we would appreciate, any insight you have on the park or thoughts. That may help us identify what the priorities are out there. I think we'd be happy to look at those as we move forward.
Chairman.
Mr. Moore?
So I think the flood irrigation has worked forever, and it's done pretty well, and I guess the governor said that we're still in a state of emergency for a drought. So I would just think that court something needs to be done with that, and you could just probably leave alone what we have already with irrigation. And I think the irrigation, the system that there is more effective. So something for future discussion, maybe.
Yep, and that sounds good. Up until recently, I managed the Parks Department, but I no longer manage the Parks Department. And so I think those discussions could be had probably with our new Parks and Recreation Director, and with the Parks Department to find out really what their desire is and what the issues have been for them on the maintenance side of things and all that with the flood irrigation and what the pros and cons are. I think we would be able to welcome those discussions.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, that will take us down to item number 6 from the old consent calendar. It has been moved up to an action item. Approve resolution accepting a contract with the Caldwell Housing Authority to restore the 6th Avenue Bridge over Indian Creek in the amount not to exceed $50,000 and authorizing the city engineer to execute all necessary documents for said project.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. This is regarding the 6th Avenue Bridge, right there adjacent to TVCC on the 6th Avenue alignment. Most of you commissioners may have recognized that 7th Avenue Bridge was recently refinished. The surface was redone, and not just the surface, but also many of the structural members underneath that have experienced a significant amount of rust from all the de-icing and all of that work that has gone on over the last several years. As we, for a couple years now, the Public Works Director and myself have been trying to find a contractor and a way to get through this project, and we had talked to many structural engineers and also contractors, where we had received quotes and bids that we felt like were not reasonable. More recently, we engaged the Caldwell Housing Authority group to come take a look at it, and we felt like that they had proposed a very reasonable solution to the problems that we were having with the bridge deck coming up and the boards popping up and the tripping hazards, and especially the rust damage that we've experienced underneath all the boards. We had the first bridge done, which ended up costing about $46,000. We've had $100,000 budgeted for quite some time to get both of these bridges done, and so we estimate getting the second bridge done for about this same amount. Falls within the budget that we have been anticipating for some time, and we feel like the repairs are needed to make sure the bridge is structurally sound and make sure that we're not causing liability on the city for having something that may cause tripping hazards or other issues. So the proposal here is to complete the 6th Avenue Bridge in a very similar manner as the 7th Avenue Bridge, and to have both of the bridges up and running probably in by April, before we start the spring and summer activities.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I personally inspected it, and I went over and looked at it. Caldwell Housing Authority did a great job, so I think that's for what they charge, I think that's a heck of a deal.
Very good. Okay, I will read the resolution. Approve a resolution approving of the notice of award to, is that the right one? Yeah. To ASC Incorporated to complete.
Go up one, number 6.
Oh, my goodness, I'm sorry.
Number 6.
There you are. Approve resolution approving the quote with Caldwell Housing Authority to restore the Sixth Avenue Bridge over Indian Creek for the amount not to exceed $50,000 and authorize the city engineer to execute the contract for said work. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Allgood,
Second.
second by Mr. Moore. Any further comment? Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Alves?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Solis?
Yes.
Commissioner Mormon?
Yes.
Very good. This takes us to item number 7 from the old consent calendar, moved into action items. Approve resolution accepting the notice of award to ASC Incorporated for 602 Cleveland Boulevard parking lot project in the amount of $385,907 and authorizing the city engineer to execute all necessary documents for said project.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. The 602 Cleveland Boulevard parking lot is the parking lot that is adjacent to Flayhiff's, and it has been vacant for quite some time. The city picked up purchased the parking lot probably close to 2 years ago now with the intent that it would be, the city picked up the vacant lot a couple years ago with the intent to make it a parking lot to be able to accommodate all the city vehicles that we are seeing kind of parked all over the place, and organize all of the parking and put all the city vehicles in one location that could possibly be a secure location or at least be monitored with cameras or some kind of other type of security. This project is a little bit unique in that the site, the ground is, it does have some contamination, and city staff and myself have met with DEQ to work out what type of development is appropriate there. And really the only thing that they felt like was appropriate that wouldn't require any kind of extensive mitigation was to cap the site. And that's exactly what a parking lot does. It caps the site so that there's nothing infiltrating into the ground, and it keeps everything kind of the way it is, status quo. We designed a parking lot there in compliance with the requirements of DEQ. In addition, meeting the city's needs to be able to provide parking there for city vehicles. The project went out to bid recently, and we received 6 bids on this project, ranging from the low bid, which was $385,000, up to about $550,000. And we were very comfortable with the low bidder, ASC, who has done a substantial amount of work in the downtown Caldwell area. And we feel like if this is a project that the commission would like to move forward on, this would be a great parking lot that could be used for the city vehicles. In light of the city possibly relocating to the TVCC building, it could become a public parking lot or have some other type of parking use. And with that, this is an actual estimate, not a quote, and the design was recently completed to have this project constructed. And I stand for any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Ms. Moore?
So the ground has been declared contaminated by a test, is that right?
There has been, yes, so the assistant city engineer, who is our water quality expert, would have been able to speak to this better than me, since she is the expert in that type of thing. There have been tests in the past, and there has been contamination found. The site has been monitored for some time by DEQ. And it's not, if we move forward on this project, there's no mitigation that would be required, simply that we comply with what they have asked, and that is to make sure the site is capped with the asphalt, and to make sure that our stormwater does not infiltrate into the ground over that existing site. So our stormwater, the way the site is graded is that it pushes the water out to the gutter, and then the stormwater goes into the storm drain system that is in the public right-of-way. And we felt like this was an acceptable alternative to what we would typically require, simply because of the requirements of DEQ. DEQ is fully on board with this project, and they have, there's nothing, it has been fully transparent, I guess, between us and them, and they know exactly what we are proposing. So, to answer your question, yes, the ground was tested, and there is some contamination at that site. simply because it was some time back, it was a gas station.
Yeah, it was. So how long ago was it tested? Do we have a specific time frame of when that was tested?
I believe it has been monitored continuously. There are several monitoring wells on the site, most of which have been abandoned, but there are a few, at least one that is still being used. And so, if I'm not mistaken, it has been tested on an annual basis, but I know at least as recent as within the last 2 years it was tested.
You have a follow-up, Mr. Moore?
Oh, I just feel like we're putting off a problem there, and just by capping it, and I understand expense and the can of worms that opens, but, I mean, you got some ground there that needs to be cured, maybe, then it becomes an asset.
Comments, questions?
I just have a comment.
Mr. Morgan?
When I read this initially, when I was reading the packet, I struggled with it a lot because, again, I questioned whether it falls under an urban renewal expense. But having lived here a long time and been familiar with that spot, it has been a blighted spot for many, many, many years. And considering that it has the groundwater issue that it does, I don't see any other way for that spot to be utilized by anybody because of the high cost of rehabbing that spot. So, and I would definitely like it turned into public parking if we do move to somewhere, you know, the TVCC or whatever, so that everybody gets a chance to use it. But, yeah, that's the only way it would qualify for urban renewal, in my opinion, is it's been blighted for so many years without any prospect of it coming around any other way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm confused. So is it public parking or is it city parking?
Well, right now, it's city parking.
Right. That's what we're proposing. That's what they're proposing, correct?
I believe so. Is that
right?
Yeah, currently, as long as the development services is right there across the street, we would be proposing it as a city parking lot, primarily for all of the city vehicles that we have parked all over, and then also whatever's left over, city employees would be able to park there. So the intent would be that it would not be open to the public at this point. If the city moves to TVCC, then we would be parking probably our vehicles over in that parking lot primarily, and then that may open up this parking lot to be used for the public or for whatever purpose the city sees fit.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I think, just a comment, you know, I think at this point, we already own it. We already own the problem. We need parking there. So I think it's the best use actually for it, you know, at this point, as opposed to it not being a good use for it. You know, I know we've got a problem there in the ground, but we don't want to fix it at this point because we don't need to build anything there. You know, maybe at some point in the future it's sold, then that person can worry about the mitigation of the problem underneath as long as it's disclosed.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Rob. So do we know an expense to clean that up? Has it been determined? Versus somebody just saying it's gonna cost us $1 billion?
Yeah, I was worried you were gonna ask me that question. So I'm speaking off the cuff a little bit. My understanding is that the contamination is not extensive.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, we are not obligated to clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
It is minimal, but it does have some contamination component, and so that's why we're permitted to move forward and build the parking lot without being required to clean it up. If it was extensive and a very dirty site, then we would be obligated to clean it up before we did anything.
Mm.
And so, the cost to clean, I don't know that I could even put a number on that. I mean, you could be scraping off the top 5 feet of the whole site and then having it properly disposed of in a contaminated area. It could be extensive. It could be $50,000. It could be several $100,000. I don't know.
don't know.
And then just my feeling is that it wouldn't be cheap, otherwise, it would have been done already. I know the prior owner had tried to sell this property a few different times, and most recently, a few years ago, there was a credit union that was looking at it, and they were not permitted to build a building over the site because it's not similar to a parking lot, and so the cost to clean up, it was more than they wanted to bear, and so they ended up walking away.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. McDonald, how imminent of a project is this? I mean, is it something that you want to get done in the next 3-4 months?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project was bid out, and so if it is approved, it would be constructed within the next 3 to 4 months and completed. This project, honestly, on my list, it's probably not at the top of the priority list. We've been parking our vehicles in other lots, and that's worked out okay. If the city ends up moving to TVCC, then this lot becomes a little bit less necessary for the city. And so it's not at the top of my list. It is, however, a blighted area that will very likely never develop, or at least not for some time, unless someone comes in and wants to spend a lot of money fixing it to build a building on there. There really is no other good current use for it, in my opinion. And so it makes it a good project to just clean up this area.
Mm-hmm. The reason I was asking, would this be is the scope of the problem big enough to make us want to consider like a brownfield grant or something like that on this, or is it just so small that
that's an option.
I mean, if we
I
had
know
6
that
months to have a study done by them and find grant funding for the cleanup before paving was commencing.
Yeah, and if we ended up cleaning up the site, then maybe it could be used for something other than a parking lot, I guess is an option. I don't know what the extent of like I say, I would probably have to consult with the assistant city engineer, who's really more of the expert on this type of thing. I don't feel like this project is extremely urgent. And so if it was the commission's desire to not do this project, the city would, the city vehicles are already parking in the lot, in the dirt. And so I presume that would continue, and then some time down the road, maybe something else will come along, or some other thoughts or project proposal.
Mr. Allgood.
Based on what you're saying here, that it's not a high priority and it can be done at a later date, does our city street department have the ability to do the paving to meet DEQ standards? Not anytime in the near future, but a year down the road, can our own street department, since the city owns the lot, do the asphalt work?
Potentially, yes. There's a lot more to the project than just the asphalt, and that includes a lot of curb, gutter, and sidewalk. The sidewalk along Cleveland and 6th Avenue, all of that is going to be replaced and would conform to the downtown decorative configuration. And so our street department is not capable of doing the concrete work. We would have to hire all that out anyway. And then there is there's underground power, which for lighting, which could potentially be done by our electricians. There's irrigation, which could potentially be done by the Parks Department. And so there are some things that the city could potentially do in-house. A lot of it depends on their availability and their workload. The paving, theoretically, yes, could be done by the street department. They certainly have the expertise to pave. They don't have a lot of experience doing parking lots where you have very unique grading in kind of a small confined area. They are much better at doing long roadways or projects like that. And so I think they could do it, yes. It may be a little bit tricky, and if you're just cutting out the paving out of everything else that has to be bid out, you may not come out that much further ahead, potentially. But yeah, that's an option.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to just see in the equation here of what we're gonna do, what it would cost to, I'm used to seeing what the cost would be to have it cleaned up, so that you can say, okay, well, we'll go this way or we'll go that way.
Okay.
And I know there's an expense to that too.
Right. Well, I'll read the resolution and we'll see what happens. Approved resolution approving of the notice of award to ASC Incorporated to complete the construction of the parking lot at 602 Cleveland Boulevard for the amount of $385,907 and authorizes the city engineer to execute the agreement for said work. Do we have a motion for or against?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Allgood.
I would make a motion that this be tabled or not considered at this point. I think we may have some other things on our priority list that could use the money, over this.
Okay, we have a motion for not approving the resolution. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Allgood, second by Mr. Moore. Further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
so we've got to complete tonight what we're gonna spend this money on, right? So where's this money gonna go? If we don't allocate it to this project? I'm sorry, I wanna make sure that we're doing everything we need to do tonight. This is our last chance to allocate funds.
Yes, so we do need to allocate this funding if you guys do not decide. I did have an idea, though, that you might want to present or put forward in relation to this. You could potentially say you want to earmark these funds, maybe not approve the resolution that's here, but say you want to earmark these funds for this lot in general, and then give direction as to getting some testing done and using this funding to get testing done, and then move forward with the potential remaining funds is what we want to do there, potentially capping it. Urban Renewal's contribution would be no more than the amount listed here of $385,907. That would potentially be enough to do testing and then maybe pay for remediation if the commissioners decide to move forward with that. If the funding is then not used at, or if the testing's done and whatever, and we're still left with several $100,000 in this bucket to, and we decide not to move forward with any potential future use of that property, we can then at that time allocate it to one of the existing approved projects. So that would mean you would not be authorizing the resolution for ASC to do the parking lot, but then approving it on this sheet as an obligated funds for that lot and that project in general, and just change the direction of that project. So that is an option that you can direct us to tonight. Otherwise, if you want to completely take it off the table, you would have to find one of the other approved projects. The one other project I have on here is the USIC widening Indian Creek Bridge. That is a current project that we plan to, if there are cost savings, we plan to hopefully use some of the cost savings to go toward that project. And ideally, that would be where these funds would land if there were cost savings there, or if it's not approved tonight.
Thank you,
Chair.
Michelle.
Mr. Moore?
Mr. Chairman, I get a question.
Yes.
So basically, that would just say we're gonna move it down a line to the priority project or request pending? Is that what we would do with that earmark?
No, because tonight we have to approve
Oh.
all the earmarks. So you would just say that you are still going to earmark $385,907 toward this lot, not necessarily for the construction of the thing, but maybe for alternative,
Yeah.
testing and potential for something else that might go there, or a piece of that if you want to reduce the amount
Okay.
based off of Rob's recommendation for what that might cost.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Waterman, we'll get you in here.
A quick comment, Commission. So, this is the only meeting presently scheduled between the current date and December 21st. December 21st is actually the date that is significant because that marks the planned termination date of the plan. So, the obligation is not that you approve anything tonight. Just so happens that tonight is the only scheduled meeting. The Commission is welcome to have a special meeting if more information can be gained between now and the 21st. And at one point that was actually contemplated having a special meeting, but given sort of how narrow the funnel was on the projects that were highest priority, staff anticipated that likely we could accomplish this tonight. You were not obliged to accomplish this tonight. If there's an item left out for one reason or another, we do have time to have a special meeting and we can get that done. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Allgood?
I would leave my motion the way it is, sir.
Okay. All right. Further comments? Could you read that motion back for us?
It's a long time ago.
Mr. Eldred, to not consider this project at this point for allocation. That's how I heard it.
Okay. And we had a second by
I second it.
Mr. Moore. Okay. Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Eldred,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Doherty,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
Okay. That takes us to what had been on consent calendar as item number 8, approve resolution accepting the statement of qualifications from Cushing Terrell for design services at the Nancola Center and authorizing the Public Works Director to negotiate and execute all necessary documents for said project in an amount not to exceed $1 million. Who gets to handle this one?
I can take a stab at it. This is an item that has been worked on by the Public Works Director. And so I'm intimately familiar with all the other items that I've discussed. This one, not quite as much. However, the intent here is to rehabilitate, or I should say remodel the TVCC building to be able to accommodate many city departments to move over to that location. There have been discussions between the mayor and TVCC, and the discussions have led to a scenario where TVCC would maintain what sounds like the third floor of the building for some period of time, and possibly until their lease is completed, while the city would move in and utilize the first and second floors of the building. Staff initiated a conceptual design through with Cushing Terrell, which was not to exceed $50,000 in cost, and so they were hired outright to start putting together a conceptual design. And then staff would like to has moved to take the next step, which is getting basically a complete design of what that renovation would look like. Staff went out to solicit requests for qualification, and only one request was submitted to the city, and that was Cushing Terrell, who had done the initial work. And that request was for $160,000 to do the full design. Because of the regulations and requirements with urban renewal funding, no more than $1 million can be spent from urban renewal on the building without going through additional steps and having a vote of the citizens of Caldwell. The intention here is to not exceed $1 million, to use the funding to complete the design, and then also have the renovations done within the building and keep it under that $1 million threshold, to be able to accommodate the move of city departments over to that building and be able to vacate existing city facilities. With that, that is about the extent of my knowledge, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So Rob, so the $1 million caps at that. There's no overrides. There's no That's the law, that's the rule, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
It cannot be exceeded.
And was that to fix the floor? What was that? What were those updates?
So the updates have not been completed yet, but the plan is that to move the city facilities in there, there would be some rooms that would have to be remodeled. There would be some additional offices constructed in some locations, some partitions. There would have to be some renovations with regards to the HVAC system, possibly the fire sprinkler system, so that it can be adapted to meet the new configuration of what some of the rooms would look like. A vast majority, maybe even 50% of the building would not have to be remodeled. The configuration that it's in now would work for those departments that may be there, but there are some rooms that would need some renovation, and that's what it would be going toward.
So I see that everybody's stacked in there like sardines, where you're the present deal, but I just don't see this as a URA project.
Are you open for comments, or you still want questions from Mr. McDonald?
Let's see. Yeah, let's go with comments.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have something on your mind?
A whole bunch, yeah. This move to the TVCC building has been a kind of an odd duck. It has been talked about, but correct me if I say anything wrong, Councilman, Commissioner Doty, but it has never been brought to the council or discussed. It's not in our budget, in the city budget, to move this. There's never been any formal action on, that I'm aware of, on ending the contract with TVCC. I realize they're in negotiations to do that, but I, as a council member, have not been a party to any of that. And so, I don't know if that stuff's gonna take place or not, but I feel like it should. I mean, Mr. Waterman, I don't know if you can enlighten me any. The contract with TVCC is with the city or with Urban Renewal? Do you know off the top of your head?
So, Commissioner Allgood, I believe it's with the city. We are working on getting a initial meeting set up with TVCC and to discuss what that would look like. And so, in anticipation of that meeting, we'll go through the contract for the fine-tooth comb to figure out exactly what the mechanics would be. But you are correct that it is still in place. As I understand it, TVCC has expressed, TVCC, as I understand it, has decreasing in-person enrollment at the building and has subsequently, as a consequence of that, expressed an interest in finding a space that's more suitable in terms of its capacity to what their needs are. So I have no reason to think those negotiations would not go fine. And it's also true, to the best of my knowledge, that there has been no formal vote by council to approve a relocation. I should be more. There's been no just vote to approve relocation, and council would have to obviously vote on any expenditure of funds associated with that. So that would need to come before council. In terms of the action tonight, earmarking the funds for this purpose won't be illegal, but if the concern is a procedural one, practically or in terms of opinion on best management of government, that's a legitimate, fine concern to have. You can have that concern, and it's not illegal also to vote in that way. But I don't think there's a legal impediment to encumbering the funds for this purpose. You're correct that no formal action has been taken by council on this. I'm trying to think here. I guess the one other comment I'll make is it's like with all things that are both administrative and require funding, it's a blended council mayoral thing. I don't think, for example, that any funds had to be expended to relocate economic development to the airport hangar building, which is now where Mr. Jenkins and Ms. Morales are located. Had it required the expenditure funds, then that, assuming it was over the minimum cap, well, even if it wasn't, those would have to be budgeted for. So um, it's a blended decision, but certainly if it requires the expenditure of funds, it would have to come before council before it was finalized, which this would, I believe. I'm certain.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Waterman. So is it fair to say that, okay, so TVCC, there is no contract to void yet, nothing's been done, that's still just talk, is that right?
Commission, there is a rental agreement that would require modification in order for it to represent some change in occupancy. So in the event that TVCC wanted to occupy a smaller portion of the building than they do now, and the city was going to occupy any of it, in order for the lease to reflect that, it would require a modification, and there is a lease in effect. Yeah.
Okay, so then there is no vote by city council to relocate city offices to that building?
That's
There's
correct.
been nothing that's been done on that, correct?
That's correct.
So is it fair to say that we're just kind of speculating this whole deal?
That would not be, that'd be a fair thing to say. You could say it's speculative in a sense, but
Mr. Waterman, what would be the worst-case scenario if we committed funding, I mean, we've already been paying for some design fees. What happens if we approve this and then city council decides by vote not to move?
So, Chairman, I will address that in just a second. I want to make a point though. Many projects have barriers to completion, and the word speculative, I think is accurate, but it also has a connotation of it. To my mind, at least when I hear it, it connotes something that's fanciful in a sense. And so I agree this would be speculative in the sense that there are impediments to it. It's not something that Urban Renewal can hit the switch on now. There's a series of switches that would have to be hit. But it also has had legwork done that has moved it from the realm of just an idea to there's a path to do it that the doors appear to be unlocked. They do have to be open. So you are correct, but I wanted to make that point. The consequence of approving it and then having it not move forward would be that the agency would then have funds that were back to being unencumbered. The background to all of this is maybe worth noting at this point. The Urban Renewal Law is found in Title 50, Chapters 20 and 29, and it has changed as time has gone on. And our Urban Renewal Plan is much like a house that was built in the 80s. It is both compliant with the code, but may not be compliant if you were going to rebuild it today. The code's different. And so our plan has existed in multiple eras of urban renewal law where things have been tweaked. For example, the reason you see $1 million is because of a change in, I think it was within the last few years, that was a preemptive response, if that's a thing, I think, to Boise talking about building a stadium complex in downtown Boise using the CCDC, and the legislature wasn't interested in having that, giving the city the latitude to do that, so they took away the option. And there were changes in 2016, and there have been changes before that. So our plan, we are tasked with complying with the law, but we have a plan that was built under a different law. One obligation at the plan is supposed to terminate on its termination date. The Urban Renewal Law also acknowledges that the agency will receive revenue from the current assessment year, which is not paid until next year. So we need to have our plan terminate when it's supposed to, which is December 21st. But the law appears to contemplate the fact that revenue is received after potentially the termination of a plan. And exactly how that works is slightly differently significant here because our plan was adopted prior to that law being in place. And so our plan has the termination date that's set forth in it, which acknowledges December 21st as the termination date and acknowledges that revenue received for the assessment year 2022 will be received by the agency in 2023. So to do our best to comply with the law, which requires a budget in the final year, which you've already adopted, that assesses whether or not there's sufficient revenue to cover the outstanding projects, and then requires notification to the state tax commission and to the county, which will happen after this meeting, well, after the city council adopts their final ordinance. There was both a resolution adopted at budget time that said, it didn't trigger the insufficient revenue, which is bond related, and I won't go into that, but there are situations where a plan can be extended because there's unpaid bond debt, and the legislature didn't want bond lenders to be out on the limb simply because of a planned termination date. That's how I understand how that works. That doesn't apply here. But the agency acknowledged that there was going to be sufficient revenue for the purpose of that bond issue to cover the estimated project costs, but that the plan would need to have its full duration as set forth in it, which is December 21st, with revenue received in 23 for the 2022 assessment. And I'm certain that I'm boring you all to death now, but I apologize. But at this point, what we want to have before the termination date is an agency commitment to the degree possible based on plan of the funds that are available. And so there are iterations of that. There are some that are under contract. There are some that are being earmarked. There are some that are being completed. A circumstance may arise where somebody violates a DDA and you end up with a piece of property again. And that is an inevitable consequence of engaging in the activities permitted by the law. But the exact steps you take in that circumstance, we don't have any guidance on that exactly. So anyway, that bridge will be crossed if we come to it. So the reason you are seeing some items where there's less specificity, where there's still doors to open, is because we are trying to make sure we're complying with both the spirit and the letter of the law to the absolute degree that it requires. And so typically, you wouldn't, or not typically, it may be the case that this request would have come now if this request was coming in 2018. It may be that the request would come slightly later. But by virtue of the timing situation we have going on, we are doing our best to commit to projects. If somebody says, what are you doing with all that money? We can say, this is what we're doing. We have projects associated with money is associated with projects. We've complied with the law. We know revenue's coming in next year. This is the bucket it's going into. So anyway, that is a very long-winded, and I do apologize for that, but I think, unfortunately, about as succinct as I could be of an explanation for why this particular item is before you and has the items it has. And again, I think I've said it already, but I apologize.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That was very informative. Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
What did the city originally pay for the TVCC building? Urban Renewal, what was the cost of that building?
I am not certain. If Rob or Rochelle don't know, then it may not be available right now.
2007, wasn't it?
Some time ago.
$1 million.
I
No
honestly
idea.
do not remember.
No idea.
And then, I just, it's a big, gorgeous building, great location. Just seeing it as is, putting city offices in there, I don't see how much revenue we're gonna create off of that, tax revenue. So I think, Matt, we really need to look hard at this. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Doty?
I think some of the other things that have been discussed is the buildings that they're currently in could be sold. Again, none of it's been decided by council certainly, and that's where your tax revenue would come from, would be from those buildings. I think the intent.
From the sale of the existing ones.
The existing ones, correct. Again, none of it's been voted on by council, but I think
Right, but that's the
an
theory.
idea that's been thrown
Yeah.
out, that we shouldn't keep those buildings, that we should
Right.
sell those to.
I do know back when TVCC was built, part of the master plan of urban renewal was we needed an educational institution downtown.
Right.
That was a big drive. That was the purpose for the TVC. It was built to purpose. And so, when we initially spent the money for that building, it was part of the master plan to have an educational institution downtown.
Great foot traffic downtown.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The change to city offices, when the law changed, you know, it was because there was a lot of people upset that we were building public buildings with urban renewal money.
Right.
For instance, the county administration building. And so they changed the law so that you couldn't use urban renewal money for public buildings without a vote of the citizens. So, anyway. If I say anything inaccurate. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, now I wanna know what that building cost. I don't know why I have 24 million in my head.
I don't know that is it relevant to our
I
question
think it
now?
is. I think it's very relevant compared, you know, we've got money that we put into it. I see it as an asset that could make revenue.
How's everybody's frame of mind for a special meeting in, perhaps next week?
I'm wide open.
Not, yeah, it won't be Tuesday. Would everybody be available? We set something for Monday or Wednesday?
I,
Available Monday.
Or would, you have a different idea?
well, I agree with Mr. Moore that I don't believe it's urban renewal money. I don't believe it's appropriate to use urban, I mean, I like the idea of City Hall going over there. It'd be wonderful to have everybody in one spot.
But it's not urban renewal money, you're right.
That's my thinking, is I just don't think it's appropriate for urban renewal money.
It's not blight, it's not blight we're trying to.
Right, it is occupied, we have a rental agreement. Like I said, I
There's other
understand the desire to be over there, cause I would have the same desire. But, I just don't agree with the funding source, and a week from now wouldn't change my mind on that.
I think we're ready for a motion.
Yes, would somebody like to make a motion?
Don't shoot me. Well, I would just make a motion that we, deny this request for $1 million to renovate the TVCC building.
We have a motion by Mr. Allgood. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Warwick. Any further discussion? Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Allgood,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Porter,
I'm going to abstain. I could make an argument either direction.
Commissioner Doty,
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, guys, for the frank and honest discussion. We appreciate
For
that.
that, cause we do need to take care of our city employees as
We
well.
do.
But I think there's other options.
Now we have to figure out what to do with
Yep.
$1 million and how much?
Well, it can go back to the taxing districts, though.
Well,
$385,000.
and
There's some other
I don't
projects.
know whether it's
there as well.
appropriate or not. I know there's some items that they took off our list.
Right.
Maybe
And-
Rochelle has a recommendation.
Well, and also, we could reconsider the downtown signage if we have money that we didn't spend. I mean, cause that is an appropriate project,
It is.
so, bingo.
There you go. Good idea.
Rochelle, would you like to come back up and maybe walk us through each one of the projects that are on our list, both the ones that are pending, the priority, and the ones that are in process? We'll just go through one by one.
Okay. As far as the TVCC building goes, I can't tell you that number, but I wanna say between 6 and 10 million. That's kind of where my head's at. but
10 was
I don't-
where I was
That's kind of a large range. I think it might have been originally 6, but then ended up being more than that, yeah. So, but,
This brings us back to action item number 1, where we're,
yeah.
looking at that final resolution, so.
So we've already talked about, several of the items on here, so I'm just gonna go through the ones that we have not yet talked about. Rob can, provide questions if you need more detail. Some we've already talked about, and I'll just reiterate them again. So the first one we have listed that we haven't discussed is, we had about $56,329 left for, potential, cleanup at the old Bennett machine, site, prior to development. That might potentially be needed as the developer comes in, so that amount was set aside, and we are asking for approval on that. have anything to add on that, Rob?
The only thing I would add, I guess, Mr. Chairman, is that we don't know what the cost would be on that, and so we've earmarked that, with anticipation that there's gonna be some cost, but, we're not expecting it to be extensive.
And there is a brownfield study being done on that as we speak.
That is correct.
But that is already earmarked, right?
Yes.
That is earmarked, yes, and we're asking for, official approval.
Okay.
Or official earmarking tonight.
Is that an action item somewhere?
No, it's,
It's
well,
on
the
the-
action item is
that one
the,
The whole
resolution.
thing?
yeah,
The whole
it's the
thing.
whole thing,
Got
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. That number again was how much, Rochelle?
56,329.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I was confused.
It's up a little toward the top of the urban renewal. There you go. It's the third project listed under the second category. There you go. We already put some cost into the demo, so the original project cost was 125, and then we paid for the demo, and there's about 56,000 left there for potential remediation or study.
Mhm.
So how do we need to do this? I mean, if we're not
So-
approving the whole thing,
So this is me just letting you know what's on the list, and then if you guys have questions, you can ask, and then you can talk about it. And then I figure when we're done talking about it, you can identify, if you're okay with earmarking those funds, or if you want to see those funds go elsewhere, or if you want to table it for the special meeting, which it sounds like we're gonna have.
Or not.
So that one, I guess I would ask if you guys are okay with earmarking, or keeping that amount earmarked for that project.
I'm good with that. I
Yes.
mean,
56,000?
we're already obligated. We've told them.
Project, listed is the Plaza Extension, Festive Street, Arthur Street downtown, that, we recently got a bid in for 3.2 million. Rob can provide some.
Yes, thank
Sure.
you. I would just mention that it's Arthur and Seventh. So
Okay.
the Seventh Avenue section all the way to Main Street is also part of the project. And what that project looks like is it's a complete rebuild. Everything's torn out, including the sidewalks, all the way up to the face of the buildings. And it will be reconstructed all as a plaza with no vertical curbs. It'll have seating amenities, fire pits, and a lot of other types of things that would match the theme that goes along with the plaza.
We've kind of anticipated that all along, that would be part of it, so I'm good with that. I mean, I'm not good with the cost, but I guess we don't have a choice there. But I think we all have to be on the same page. I mean, we're gonna approve this thing.
Which thing are we on again? We're on the
The
extension.
plaza not,
Street.
so I'm confused.
Okay.
So I thought I clarified this just a little bit ago. So is the plaza, I want to make sure I call it the right, the Plaza Extension Festival Street, is it approved or has not been approved?
Pieces of it have been approved, so the difference between the amount budgeted and the amount remaining is the difference between the amount remaining and the amount to be approved is what hasn't been, what has been approved already. So in the remaining amount, there's 3.251 million remaining to complete the project. You guys have already approved, I wanna say the difference between that is $30,000 worth of preliminary work, for
Yeah, and so
design and stuff.
design has been approved, and so there is design work going on. And so basically what would be approved here would be what the anticipated construction cost would be to construct the entire plaza. We have not bid this project out yet because design is not complete, but these are the numbers that we received from the consultants on what their estimate of the construction of the plaza is gonna be. So design has been approved by Urban Renewal, construction has not. but this would earmark the funds so that construction could move forward, this coming year.
But we would still be short 2 million, right? There's 3 million.
Yes. That's what I'm confused on.
Two to
is that
go.
we've already
This seems
budgeted
confusing the way this
$3.2
is being explained.
So the amount budgeted, I guess you guys can ignore that if it's making it confusing. The remaining amount, it's the amount budgeted, and the remaining amount just shows the difference between what we spent to date and what we potentially have in the budget. You haven't already approved all of the budgeted costs. So in the unobligated is the piece that you haven't yet approved out of the budgeted amount.
So what we did is we
That-
spent that
is
money for design, intending to go ahead with those improvements. And now we have an estimate of what those improvements are going to be, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
But a million's not
Com-
gonna cover 3.2 million.
the commission, can I try to, I think I can maybe help with some different terminology for this. The column that's amount budgeted, that is total project cost. Okay, so amount budgeted sounds like it's unexpended or it's an estimate of some sort, but that's just the project cost. So we're gonna stay with the Festival Street. The project cost for that project is $3,277,473. The column that isn't up there, that could be up there, and you can sort of have it up there in your head, which is fun for you, would be a column called amount expended towards the project cost. And that would be the difference. In every instance, it will be the difference between the remaining column and the total project cost. So the one you can have in your head that is in that gap there is the amount expended. So for Plaza Extension Festival Street, there's a $3.27 million project cost. There's been an expenditure of about 30 grand, which leaves you with a remaining project cost that has yet to be expended of $3.25 million. For the purpose of tonight, that's why we have the column on the far right, which is giving you information about what contracts exist in relation to the remaining money to be expended. So, for example, we're going to go to Canyon Hill to Sacagawea, which is the third down at the top of the list. The total project, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, the total project cost for that project is 360 grand. We have spent 180-ish thousand, and we have 150 grand more to go. That's all under contract, which is why that amount over there is 0. So I'll do one more example just to solidify. The total project cost for the demo and cleanup of Bennett Machine, which is the third down of the URA project, City of Caldwell, the red block. Total project cost 125. The amount we've already expended is about 70 grand, which is in the gap there that we're just imagining. It's real, but anyway. The amount that is left to be expended is 56,329, which is the amount that amount that's left to be expended is also not under contract. And so part of the purpose of tonight is to move that 56 grand and cross it out, the consequence of which it'll have no consequence on the project cost, it'll have no consequence on the amount expended or the amount remaining. It will simply, from a
It'll be there for us to spend on the project.
from a book of contracts perspective, we will now have a resolution, not a contract, but a writing that says the agency has committed that fund to pay for that project, as opposed to right now it's just unobligated funds in your general account.
And so all of these unobligated funds are what go together to spend the rest of the money that we are trying to spend, right?
Yes, the unobligated amount plus the obligated amount, which would be in theory in the gap column, should add up to the amount budgeted, i.e. the project cost. I don't know if I made it worse or better.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Mr. Organ?
Douglas, just a quick question. Under law, are we allowed to retain any funds just for contingency because we're seeing all our costs vary so much to make sure we meet our obligations? Is there any allowance to have some kind of contingency just to make sure we pay our bills?
So the law It says thou shalt plan, for plans that are, if we're gonna create a plan today, it says thou shalt plan projects and estimate costs. And then it says, when you get in every year, you have to create a budget. And if the amount of revenue you have is sufficient to cover the projects you planned, then you're done. So the analysis we look at to determine whether the plan can end is comparing project and project costs, which are specific and don't include like a contingency fund, compared to the total amount of revenue we have. The plan was created at a time when there was more play in the joints of all of that, and I'd have to go back and review the code and the amendments by year to iterate exactly how that changed. But it's one thing in a contract. Contracts regularly have contingencies built into them. I think that is reasonable to say that is part of a contract. We know prices fluctuate, so there's a 10% buffer in the contract. We don't have an enumeration of appropriate projects of like a general contingency for all projects. So I don't think it's advisable under the law, even though our plan pre-exists some of the current iteration of it, to just leave an amount unearmarked as a contingency. I think if we have an amount that we've earmarked as a contingency, it's arguable that that is an amount that's therefore unnecessary to an extent, and that amount then should be returned to the other taxing districts.
I'll shut up.
If all my answers are long enough, you're going to stop asking me questions. So.
I've only been told to do all this because he said I had to.
Okay, what's next, Rochelle?
Okay, so the next project is $100,000, which we talked about earlier in the DDA agreement for the potential demo of the Norman building. The next project on here is for Vineyard Public Space. We've talked about this in previous meetings. This is maybe Rob can help. I know Brent's been working on this, but I think we're going to do some alleyway improvements there by the Vineyard and then renovate that Vineyard space, I believe.
So the area where the Vineyard is, we currently have a contract with Cushing Terrell to provide a design for kind of a mini plaza in that location, and also to rehabilitate that alley, which is kind of an old asphalt alley that's kind of messy. Because of the amount of traffic we get in that area, especially this time of year, we felt like it was necessary to put something that's a little bit more usable there. And so we do have a project in the works to basically rebuild that entire triangle with a plaza-like area that's kind of tiered because of the topography, with some overhead lattice work and lighting and all sorts of things like that. And so the design's in the works. The funding for the construction is here in the plan.
Okay. The other item listed that has not yet been discussed is under priority projects. It's the Lubby Park irrigation system for $300,000.
And that is currently out to bid now, and we are very confident it'll come in under that some amount.
Is that flood irrigation now?
No, it is pressure irrigation. A portion of the park is already pressure irrigated. The Parks Department has been trying to get the rest of the park under pressure irrigation for some time now, and with the pickleball court coming in and the desire to make sure that we're just enhancing that park and we're not still flood irrigating all over the place, that's something the Parks Department has been pushing for.
The last four I'm gonna kind of sum up, well, no, I'll do these separately. Okay, so then under requests pending, we have underground power, in the alley. I think, that's a project to relocate power underground, and there's $250,000 there. Is there anything else you wanna add to that, Rob?
Is that the one we already
No,
talked
that's the
about?
one I referred to earlier, to get some of those overhead power lines put underground in the alleys.
Okay. And then there's, the U-Stick widening Indian Creek Bridge. The overall cost for that project is significantly high, but we have thrown $158,000 from urban renewal funds in this project, with hopes that there, might be cost savings that we can throw into this project. If not, we have $158,000 that we're asking to earmark, for that. Rob, do you wanna add anything on that?
Yeah, simply that, the Indian Creek Bridge at Ustick Widening is a necessary part of the Ustick Widening project. It was not bid out as part of the road project because it's a considerably different type of work, and so that was held and bid out separately. I apologize. It hasn't been bid out yet. We've had the design completed, and the cost is so significant, and so our intent really was in this plan here, anything that does not get spent in the next year would automatically roll into this project if there were no other priorities identified. And then the remainder of that bridge on U-Stick would be covered by the street department funding, and come out of that fund balance that the street department has.
And then the last two projects under the request pending are the Wolf Field, hitting facility. We decided to keep that one in there, seeing as we cut the Wolf Field parking, that was in the previous listing. And then, the Rice House, which has already been approved earlier. So, ideally, what I'd like to get from you guys tonight in relation to this list, we've already got, the 602 Cleveland parking lot that we want more discussion on, and then this TVCC remodel we want to do more discussion on. I guess, are there any other projects listed in this unobligated portion that you guys want to potentially discuss and table or talk about potentially moving, or are you okay with the remainder of these being earmarked the way they are?
Did you want to mention your, wayfinding again?
Oh, that was Chris that brought
Is
that
that you?
in.
And so, Rochelle, I just have doing the math, because, the 97,000 was taken out earlier that we didn't use for, which one?
Lions Park.
Lions Park.
Mm-hmm.
And then we took out, 386,000 roughly for 602 Cleveland.
Right.
And then we took out $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
for TVCC, so that, we eliminated over
$1.5
1.4 million,
Yeah.
almost 1.5 million. And then we've said yes to some of these things. I'm just trying to get a balance.
Yes, we had to decrease all of those so that we could complete the plaza extension, because that increased, by that amount in
So-
project cost, so we had to decrease
So
these other costs.
Are we all in agreement that the rest of the stuff is good to go?
I am.
Are we approving that? Are we good there? I'm just trying to get a sense. So this is my deal. If we could get from you, Rochelle,
Yeah.
a final total, approving the 3.2 for Festival Street. If we have enough money left over, then I would bring back the signage, to include that in our budget. I don't know what our total is bringing this stuff back, so if we have enough money, I would bring that back.
We could bring it back, potentially, we'd have to identify what project we do want to take it from that has been earmarked here. Because you've said no, I mean, potentially if 602 Cleveland goes, you could say part of that goes toward the wayfinding, or, the TVCC, you could say parts of that, since you guys don't seem, in agreement on those ones. That funding then becomes available for either another project on this list or something like the wayfinding, so that's, there is available funding in that sense.
I'm just looking for a balance. Is there more money do we need to spend more money? How much money is returned to the taxpayer? I'm looking for a balance.
Commission,
Balance.
Rochelle, so let me ask this. The section that's called requests pending, if everything had been approved, including the TVCC remodel and the irrigation, Luby Park, and the other one I'm forgetting now.
Parking
Why?
Parking lot.
602 Cleveland.
Would that have left $0 for the request pending?
No, I've worked all of these projects into the budget, so if you see down at the bottom, there's that number, 21.869. You see that total remaining project cost? That is the total amount that Urban Renewal has in funds to spend in the next year, all of which have been obligated in one of these projects above. Not in stone. We're here tonight to make it, I guess, more solidified. But I have accounted for every dollar that will be received in revenues and fund balance. So we project to get 10 million in revenue, a little bit more, 10.5 million in revenue, incremental revenue in the next year. And we have about 10 million in fund balance, 9 or 10 million in fund balance we need to spend down. So the total comes to this 21. If all the projects were to be approved in this unobligated amount, we would have no money left. So we're trying to earmark funds because of the urgency of trying to get these earmarked because of the letter of the law. Normally, these wouldn't come to you until we were ready to start construction and we had a contract in place, and then we would say, do you approve it? And it would get approved, and then we would start the work. So we're kind of in advance saying, can we earmark these funds for these projects in advance of construction actually happening with the best possible numbers that we could come up with? So this $9 million, that is the amount we're asking for you to approve. Out of the 21,869, you guys have we already have in contract, what's that, $12 million that's going out the door, you know? So we have already obligated and in contractual agreement said we are going to spend 12 million out of the 21 that's going to be received this year. So the 9 million is what's left that we need to kind of say, okay, we haven't yet quite gotten there. Some we have, which we have resolutions for tonight, but there's others that we just haven't quite gotten to that point where we're ready to go out to bid and do the rest of the project. So we're asking to at least earmark it and say, yes, this is funds that can be used toward these projects. So if you want to add another project that's not on here, it will have to come out of one of these projects already identified.
1.5 million that we.
Well, yeah, and I'm not.
That
not
makes
getting the
sense.
question.
No, we've already
You're not?
canceled some of those, though,
Right,
correct?
right.
So we have 1.5 million that we could take and spend on other things because of the things we said we didn't want to approve.
That's my.
It's
Right.
1.488,
Okay.
I think it is.
Yeah.
And we could give that back to the taxpayer.
That was my question, is after, at the end of the day, because we've denied 3, we have this 1.488.
Do with that.
Right, that's why I was asking about contingencies and.
So it either goes back to the taxing districts or to the project.
And I agree, I think,
Hmm.
since we've done that, I think wayfinding is an important one for downtown and fits perfectly within urban renewal.
What is that, I'm sorry?
The wayfinding, the signage for downtown. 245?
45 is the URA portion, there's the 375
Yeah.
total.
Yes, yes.
But isn't that gonna be more than 1.4 million?
Technically, we haven't approved.
Yeah, it's 1.483.
No, but
Well, that's why most of them are in the unobligated.
but we have to decide if we're in agreement with those to
Mhm.
spend
I
that money.
understand, I
Right.
understand, but right now they're not approved, so we actually should be more than 1.4.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot more that hasn't been.
Yeah, I'd have to grab a calculator.
Tonight.
Yeah. If we do hold a special meeting, what I'll do tonight is pull the projects, as we did approve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 projects were approved on this list. So those projects will now move out of the unobligated column and go away. So it will reduce this 9 million now to, I don't know, see, that's I'd say it'd reduce it to maybe 6 million, because we've approved about 3 million in costs, maybe a little bit more tonight in these other things. And so then at the special meeting, we could come back to that and say, okay, now after that approval. But if there's anything on here where you're like, yeah, we're good, we wanna earmark it, then let me know and I'll take that, out of consideration as being thought about. I can add the wayfinding here and then pull it from maybe the Cleveland parking lot and then have you guys re-identify what you wanna do from there.
Well, I'm confused. Why would you need to pull it from there if there's 1.4 million still left or more?
The only reason you have 1.4 available is because you did not say okay to the 602 Cleveland and you did not say okay to the
Right, so it shouldn't
TVCC. So those together are about 1.4. So that leaves,
be pulled from the remaining amount, not necessarily from another.
we can do
Project,
that and
right.
then you're left with excess funding.
So
That's-
understand, yeah.
It's unobligated. That's correct. Yes.
My math says we've reduced that 9 million to 7.5 million,
Okay.
and some change, but
Yeah.
just rounding it.
So we just need to determine basically what she's asking. Are there some of these up here that are unobligated? For instance, the Plaza Street. Are we good with that? Are we good for her to now say that's obligated?
Mhm.
That's my opinion, yes.
Me too. But I think we have to have a consensus on that to tell her what
Mhm.
to make obligated, and then we'll know what's still up in the air for a special meeting.
Yeah, and then if there, and I can just pull the funding off. If you wanna say no to these projects, I can come back to you and say, okay, now here's a contingency bucket, I guess you could say, but we don't, like Doug said, really wanna list a contingency. We wanna put it somewhere. So if we don't put it to one of the projects listed, then we need to identify what we're gonna put it to.
Asking us to obligate that money toward that.
Mr. Waterman? Mr. Waterman, I have a question. Since all of these things came in the form of a single resolution that we were looking to pass or refuse on, can we take these things up one at a time? Or should we just do that, maybe come back at a special meeting where we have cleaned up what we know and propose something fresh, or review this one at that time?
So based on the things that have been, already sort of, designated as no-goes that are in the gray up there, I think we are sufficiently gonna be deviated from our current resolution to need a new one. So what I'd recommend tonight is to limit the uncertainty for your special meeting as much as possible by going from the top of the list to the bottom for the items that are being requested to be converted to a certainty, and say, yes, we want it to be a certainty, or no. And then at the next meeting, there can be two resolutions, one dealing with the uncertainty and one that everyone's already on the same page about. But
Can we accomplish that just informally by common consent?
you can accomplish a sufficient direction to staff that what we bring back will be,
Okay.
will have the practical, the practical consequence of it will be that your next meeting will be, there'll be less on the plate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, I'd recommend starting at the top of the list
Exactly.
here, going down, saying, and you can, you don't have a vote. I think you can just voice, you can have a vote. It won't be an official vote. It'll just be essentially a poll, for the purpose of staff
There you go.
direction, for each item.
So we're just looking at the amounts in the unobligated column
Correct.
that we need to discuss,
Yes,
right?
those are the only items that need to be discussed, and, yeah.
You stick to Indiana, that's the roundabout.
Yeah, so that one and the 1.6 million have been approved through the resolution that was already identified.
Okay,
Okay.
so point out which ones we need to,
So the first one that we haven't discussed tonight or have not yet approved is this demo of Bennett, which sounds like you guys are okay with keeping on
Yes.
as earmarked.
Yep.
have
Mm-hmm.
to, yeah.
The next one is the 3.2 million for the plaza extension.
And I know that seems like, yeah, it seems like a big number, but that will complete our plaza downtown and our, it'll complete the vision. right?
Okay, so we're good on that one. And then the 100,000 for the demo of the Norman's building.
Yes.
They were good.
Okay, and then the Vineyard, public space for renovating that area, getting rid of the vines and putting some, it's the next, right there.
I know it.
I think so.
Okay, I'm gonna say that's okay to keep there. The next one is the Luby Park irrigation system for $300,000.
Like if we're spending all the money for a pickleball court, we ought to finish it up by irrigating it properly.
Well, Luby Park is not where the pickleball court is.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yes, it is, I'm sorry. I'm thinking Lions still, you got me.
I'm thinking we need to leave that one.
Yeah.
Okay. And then $250,000 for the underground power in the alleyway, reallocate the power. Okay, we're good there. And then, the U-Stick widening Indian Creek Bridge, $158,613.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Woodfield hitting facility for $200,000.
We talked about that before.
That was presented at the last meeting.
I don't think that's a urban renewal project. I mean, I don't know what's everybody else's opinion.
There's some matching funds there, as I recall. Isn't there matching funds there?
That's what I thought, it was 250.
Mm-hmm.
Come down, so you're gonna be spending about $750 and you're asking, well, the budget shows $250 or $200.
Now, when we sat down and crunched numbers last Friday, we looked at the 250 that was asked for, and we had to make some cuts to get to a zero balance with funds, and we took 50,000 off of the Wolffield hitting facility to work the numbers. Our numbers are changing. If you have a desire to raise it back to 250, that's certainly within your ability to do that.
I think, when you see that the public is working hard to make something happen and doing more in matching funds than they're asking us for, I think it's a good use of money.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Moore?
On that specific Wolffield hitting facility. In the presentation that I came in on, I did not see any return on investment to historical information, other hitting fields. I mean, there's some questions I think that I have. Side of what that does for the city of Caldwell.
Regan, would you like to stand for some questions?
Man, would I?
Batter up, I guess.
She's hung in for this long, give her a chance to talk.
No, great question, Commissioner Moore. So in working with the city, the intent would be to rent it out a little bit and to use it, and then obviously for use by the Spuds. The facility is arguably one of the best in the state. I mean, we'd like to use it more. We like to see it used more. We've hosted some state tournaments there, so it would allow us to just enhance that facility more, not just for the use for the college, but also for the community and the teams that we're trying to bring into Caldwell. The estimated costs, not having the presentation in front of me, we gave kind of two different sizes and two different estimates on what that would look like. That was working with one of our construction partners, and he thought we would be within that range. So it's not a final cost for sure. We started off pie in the sky and the project was probably over $1.5 million. And so we've scaled it down to, at the end of the day, Coach Hubbard would say, just give me 3 hitting lanes and we'll call it good. The additional size and scope to the 900,000 would allow us some storage area. Right now, everything's kind of out in the elements. We kind of tuck it in the dugout. But that would be the additional cost if we decide to go a little bit bigger.
Have you looked at any historical information on anybody else that's had one in the valley?
There's a lot in the valley.
Have you guys have you pulled that, researched it?
I have with my construction company. I just don't have that off the top of my head, but the construction company kind of thought that would be within the realm. One of the other suggestions that was made, and unfortunately Mike just left, was to work with the Caldwell Housing Authority to possibly do the foundation work to bring the cost down as well. They've recently done some project out there for the city and some of the concrete work. So that's another area we look potentially for savings. We're also looking with one of our donors from some in-kind gifts in terms of part of the facility would be metal structure. We feel like we can get some of that donated, by the gentleman who donated the exterior fence.
Do you know how long it would take to get that $200,000 back into the Caldwell community, you think, return on investment?
It really kind of depends on the city's use of it. I can't speak to how often they would rent it out or what that would look like.
So you're gonna use it for the college, or gonna use it for what else?
The spuds,
Spuds, and then what else?
high school state tournaments.
Okay. And there's revenue that's gonna be charged, expenses that'll be charged, and there's revenue that'll be gathered off of that, is that right?
I would think that that's what the city has been doing as they rent out Wolf Field and Simplot Stadium.
Yeah.
Realistically, as soon as the lights went up, those fields became a lot more used, by the public.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything that's done in any of those facilities is currently run through the city. It doesn't really run through us. For us, it would not just be used for baseball, but our softball team would use it as well. So both men and women be using the facility. Not sure if the city has any intention of working with gals on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure.
I just feel like some of this, information, Mr. Chairman, it's being presented to us, but we don't have any factual numbers of, here's what it's probably gonna revenue at. Here's what we're looking at, and this thing's gonna, used to seeing something similar to that. So I guess that's my only question.
Sure.
Questions?
Yeah.
I believe there's a considerable value to the amount of people that brings from outside of Caldwell into to watch a Spuds game or a college game or high school tournaments. I believe there's a large value of money expended in the city attending those events. I don't know how to qualify that or quantify that, but I believe there's a large value there too. And I understand your frustration. We just have, 10 days to settle this.
What you're doing is you're adding an additional amenity to something that is already an amenity. You're making it a nicer amenity.
I had somebody approach me that wanted to buy my commercial ground and put up a facility very similar to that. And then I never heard back, and he said, "Boy, I'm glad I didn't do that. That's not a money-making opportunity for us. It's not a revenue-generating." So, and then I know another person, that put one up, or was a partners on one, and it didn't work out. So I just had some questions.
Sure,
That's all.
yeah.
And just on that, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Wood?
I think on your, I guess, point, it's about the people it brings in too, not just about the facility, but it's really like, we've been told it's up to the city to determine if they're gonna rent or not rent it, but just it attracts what comes there because it's available.
I understand all of that. I completely understand what it does to that community and the amount of people that it would affect, just like the gal softball field. Yeah, I get that. I just don't see where it's a complete proposal. I don't.
So on Wolf Field, is it a yes or no? Going forward, you have to give Rochelle directions.
I think we have one that's clearly not in favor. If it all comes back at one, then I don't wanna speak for him, but then you're only given an option to vote no, right? To everything else too, if you include something that someone doesn't want.
Right.
I just like the idea of kind of a public, private, and college partnership, us all working on something together to do an additional amenity for the city.
And I think that's great. I think that's exactly what we need to do. I just don't think we need to get ahead of ourselves with things if we don't have all the information in front of us. And look back at this and say, okay, what did we do here?
So what other information do you want to be brought back at a special meeting that would make you
I'd
make
like
a
to see
decision one
how
way or
that's
the other?
I'd like to see how that's actually gonna run for the next 5 years.
Is that possible? Can you do that?
I'll see what I can get together.
So that's a firm maybe.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Reagan.
And we're done.
So that's the last item on there. So right now, we have 3 projects that, will be represented at the special meeting.
And do we wanna put wayfinding back on?
I can do that if you,
That would be my request, yes.
okay.
I agree.
Okay, so I'll put the wayfinding back on, so that'll leave us 4 projects to discuss in more detail at the special meeting and solidify those, encumbrances. Is there anything?
Rochelle, which 4 projects?
It's going to be the 602 Cleveland parking lot, the, TVCC building remodel, the, Wolffield hitting facility, and the wayfinding,
Okay.
downtown wayfinding.
And,
Don't
commission,
just approve the wayfinding.
No, we've got, it's
Oh,
not
'cause
on here,
it's
so
not
we
on
have to
there.
put it
I'm
back
with
on.
you.
so, if the commission struck those 4, then the remainder of the table would stay the same. Well, no, because the totals wouldn't add up. So we're gonna have to we'll bring back at least 2. The wayfinding, again, you're not voting on it tonight. Although technically, no, you already voted on it. Sorry. That one, the general consensus of the commission seemed positive. The TVCC, the general sense of the commission, didn't hear much in terms of asking for additional information.
Mhm.
So much as I heard a expression of disinterest in doing that. So, for that one and for the parking lot, there was a request, I think, for more information in terms of a cost estimate for, remediation. And now I forgot the 4th one again, but
The motion I made on the parking lot was just no.
just no, okay.
Mhm.
So then we will either need the resolution that's brought back to identify, I know there are some buckets that urban renewal is contributing to that, the remainder was going to be funded elsewhere. Which is to say that the amount budgeted or expressed in this budget is not the total amount that could be expended. And, so we'll need to have some ability to act on the maybes, to present the commission with any alternates if necessary, and then to leave the commission with the option of leaving some funds unencumbered. Again, I think if you do that, the consequence of that, you're permitted to do it, the consequence of it will be that any unencumbered funds will need to be returned to the taxing districts. So,
Not terrible.
it doesn't say in the law whether it's terrible or not.
Yeah.
So I have no opinion on that.
Mhm.
But it's certainly legal. It is the consequence of having funds left over, is that it will be returned to the tax. This is what the legislature intended to have happen with funds that were not needed, so.
So, just so I make sure I understand, items such as the hitting facility need to be an individual item so that we can vote on that individually. And because as Commissioner Doty said, if we put them all together and we vote no on
We'll be in the same
on one
spot.
thing, we'll be in
Right.
the same spot. It's gotta be separated out so that we vote on each one individually, so that if there is a no vote on one thing, it doesn't kill the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yes, that is, we could do that. We can bring back a specific resolution for each. It is also standard practice for people to vote under objection in favor of a thing. So if there was a desire, for example, everything was brought in a packet and there was an item on there that, somebody was not in favor of, if you, ever find yourself with nothing to do in January, February, or March, you can log into the legislative session and, it seems like fairly common occurrence that somebody will get up and say, I'm taking my 30 seconds to complain about the portions of this, to object to the portions of this that I find objectionable. The totality of it, I find acceptable and vote in favor. So that is a way to, also, express an objection. But, if the request is that they each be brought back by individual resolution discussion, that can be accomplished. Shouldn't make the meeting terribly longer, as long as we work through them at an efficient rate.
Well, I think we agreed on a lot of them, so that could be one. We're just saying the ones that are controversial should be.
Okay, so then I think that sounds great. As we went through the list, I saw some head shaking at items that got enough verbal yeses to, I think, end up on the yes list. So if the desire is to figure out which ones people are unanimous about, then we need to run back through the list very briefly And if somebody has an objection to raise, they need to say, I am going to object to that, if it's put on in the final resolution, and that way we know for sure.
Yeah, well, it doesn't, yeah, it won't take long. I mean, it'd be pretty quick. I believe my general consensus is I'm okay with everything on the list that we have. But if we wanna separate out the hitting facility, if we wanna separate signage, whatever, I mean, I'm good with doing each one of them individually. Mr. Chair can make up the decision, that's why he makes the big money.
There you go. So I think TVCC is out. 602 Cleveland is out.
Yep.
Right? Are we
Yep.
all in agreement there?
Yep.
We need more information on Wolf Field, and we want wayfinding in. Right?
That works for me.
Does that give you what you need?
Yeah, so that's gonna leave some unobligated funds unless you guys want the rest to go to a project here, or you have another one in mind.
And again, as we met last Friday, we did take some significant amounts off some of these items that are listed here. And, we should be careful, and we should carefully consider, especially the U-stick widening. I mean, that's a major, major thoroughfare through the fastest growing part of our town, and
We've spent millions already. If we need to make sure that gets done, we need to make,
and anything that doesn't come out of urban renewal is gonna come out of either the street fund balance, or it will be put on the new taxpayers and new developers coming in, so.
So you're saying that if that widening goes over,
Well, we
funds
We
to
can-
appropriate to that?
You can't just
I'm
say
just
maybe.
asking a question.
in your meeting, did you cut money off of that,
that particular, well, it's,
the U-stick widening?
So, the estimates for that U-stick widening bridge or tunnel, it's the Indian Creek Bridge, on U-stick Road, are coming in somewhere around $4 to $5 million. And so everything, what we had talked about was everything that's left over from this list would get funneled into that project. And then the remainder would be covered by the street department, budget, basically, their fund balance. And so everything that we don't put toward that project is gonna be coming out of the street department fund balance. And so, what we had talked about, and my recommendation personally would be that we help fund some of those other projects that don't have the full amount of funding
the reality is, from my perspective, and of course it's a little bit naive, is that anything that we give back to the taxpayers in one form is going to be taken in the other to get this project paid for, so, no matter what the project is, so.
And another thing is if it goes back to the taxing district, they get it in pieces. So it might be $1 million going back, but one taxing district's gonna get 100, the other one's gonna get 500, the other one's gonna get a couple thousand, and they won't be able to leverage that funding like we can as a whole, because they might not be able to use it for a project, cause it's so small, they're just gonna end up putting it toward operations. And it won't have much of an impact in the end to the taxpayer.
I think I'm at a spot where I'm comfortable. I don't know if you
Me
guys.
too, and that extra money, I would feel comfortable with whatever we have unobligated going into that U-stick bridge over Indian Creek. It's a necessity.
So I can scrap the 602 and scrap the TVCC and throw those, take and add wayfinding and then put any remaining funds into the U-stick widening. We'll leave, the Wolffield hitting facility on the table, and really that will be our only item, of discussion, I guess, at the meeting. Everything else, does it sound like everything else with those
Sounds good.
changes be appropriate?
Sounds good to me.
Very good.
Okay, sounds good to me too. Do you have one more question? Do you want me to increase this to 250 or leave it at the 200?
For Wolffield?
Yeah.
I think we should leave it at 200. I mean, as a consideration.
I'm fine with that.
Obviously,
Okay.
folks aren't real
I'll leave
thrilled
that.
about it at this point, so let's not go up.
Okay, then I know what to present, and then we will, have a special meeting to discuss that further and then finalize the rest of it.
Need to set a date for that.
Yeah,
Um,
we will.
Do you guys have a date in mind? It has to be
What looks good,
week.
children?
I can't do Monday.
Okay, Wednesday?
I could do Wednesday evening. The 19th?
Wednesday, the 19th, does that work for you, Dave?
Yes, it does.
Well,
Wednesday the 21st. Oh,
Be the 21st.
that's it.
Oh,
Gotta do it before then.
Gotta do it before then.
yeah, we gotta do it.
is it into business on the 21st?
Well, and we have council meeting on the 19th, or 20th.
Yeah, so we have to have it at council by the 20th, so we have to have this, I mean, Debbie will likely
Is
want it.
there a workshop this, coming Tuesday? Do we know?
There is.
We could do an afternoon meeting?
Are you free on the afternoons, Dave?
What day are we talking?
Like the 19th? I could do it in the afternoon of the 19th, like 4 o'clock. I just have to be somewhere by 6.
For this, of course I would.
Yeah, I'm open on, at 4 o'clock on the 19th.
I would be too.
Rochelle, are you busy that day?
It's always busy.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so we have a proposed meeting date of, the 19th of December at 4 p.m. for our next special meeting. Is there anything else I need to address?
Commission, I think the last thing to address is to make sure that everyone in the room has a good sense for the scope of the additional information wanted on the batting cage. It was batting cage, right? Hitting facility. I think it's the same. But I'm not a baseball player. So the question I heard was about revenue generation and basically, essentially, what's the ROI? How long is it going to take to recoup the cost of constructing that? Staff can connect with Parks and Rec staff. C of I is not going to have any information on that, except potentially if they've got connections with other hitting facilities that have a history where they created a hitting facility and then saw an increase in revenue over time. But C of I doesn't sublease the facility. They are a tenant of the facility, and so it may be the case that the city could increase its rental rate, although C of I's is going to be static for a while with year-over-year increases, but I can't remember how long that lease is. Spuds is on a shorter-term lease. That could be potentially increased on the basis the facility's improved, and there might be one-off instances where somebody's willing to rent the facility because there's a batting cage, or where somebody's willing to rent the facility exclusively for the batting cage. I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think it's unlikely that we will have a number where the margin of error is not so wide that it's anything more than loosely informative. And we can do our best to have that by the 19th. Was that I don't know, Rob said that Wednesday's a Monday, so I think we're all a little confused. But anyway, we can do our best on that, but it's almost certainly the case that the facility cost in terms of direct payment isn't going to be recouped in any sort of time frame soon enough to make that math accurate, because it's just going to be too long term. And so again, we can present the information, but anyway, the commission may have to. It may just come down to a question of, like with any park facility, with any park facility that's non-revenue generating, whether the commission's in favor of it as a assumed zero revenue generator. And if the commission has a straw poll on that, it may help inform the information we gather. And I don't know if the commission has a sense for its direction on that, or if they just want to take it up fresh on the 19th.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Waterman's saying there's not enough time to gather that information between now and the 19th. Is that what you're saying?
I think two things. I don't know if there's enough time. I think that it's likely that as we get into it, it'll become apparent that to create a model that would give any sort of accurate prediction is essentially impossible. And I could be wrong. I'm not a math guy, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that when we come back on the 19th, it may be the case that it's not much less nebulous than it is now. So just be aware of that, and that's fine. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask for information about, certainly. But just a warning, I guess, so that
I don't know if I like that, but I see what you're saying. Comment?
If I may, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman. Thank you for that, because yes, we won't sublease the facility. We will plan to proceed with the facility at some point in time. It will just kick our can down the road a little bit. It's just, like I said,
Right.
it's just a timing matter.
Sure.
So, eventually.
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Reed. Okay. We're moving on. It's time for a treasurer report.
Okay. Right. So, currently, bank balances in the claims account for the, checking is $12,658,378. Out of that, 10 million is currently, identified in other taxing district funds, 10,892,142. 1,469,204 is restricted for city, increment, projects and funding. The LGIP is gaining interest as interest rates are rising due to economy. Balance in the LGIP to date is $748,912. LGIP is a local government investment pool. For our bond, Zion's bond accounts, most of them have been depleted, so the 2012, 2016, 2018 series bond accounts are now brought to zero as those bonds have been paid in full. The 2006 and 2008 bond accounts hold a balance of $1,495,864 to pay the upcoming bond payments this next fiscal year. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Rochelle? Do we have a motion to approve the financial report?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Warwick, a second by Mr. Doty. Will the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Olden?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Rochelle, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for playing her neck. Yeah,
Yeah,
you did
thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Feel better. I know, thanks.
Takes us to our attorney report. And Mr. Waterman, the time is yours.
All right, I'll try to be brief.
Is that possible?
No.
How about likely?
Give him a break.
So, 510 Arthur. Mark is working with Sean Maybon, who's the attorney representing the developer there. I believe he sent over a proposed DDA today, hoping to have an approval of that sometime in January. For LPC West, that had, as you will recall, there were power capacity delivery issues that arose, and $900,000 was put into an escrow account to be paid to Idaho Power if costs exceeded that. Costs did exceed that. They came in from Idaho Power just over $1 million, and so if that $900,000 was taken from escrow and paid to Idaho Power, that is done. And then the last one is tax delinquencies and penalties as increment revenue. So this, I don't know how much has been discussed, but essentially property taxes are collected when they aren't collected at the time they're supposed to be collected. Penalties, interest, and fees accrue. And it has been Canyon County's general mode of operation to retain those and not apportion them to urban renewal in the same proportions as they apportion them to other taxing districts on the basis that we are not a taxing district. So, when the request was made to them to identify why they were doing this, that was the answer they gave, that, well, urban renewal is not a taxing district, so we don't have to return the penalties, fines, and interest to them. Mark was not able to find any justification in the code for why that would be the case. When he inquired further, the county informed him or told him that a working group had been developed in the 90s to discuss what should be done with the taxes, fee, and interest, and that they determined that the county should retain them to help cover administration costs. Mark then asked to see some documentation or minutes or a resolution or something from that working group, and apparently none exists. Mark checked with LJ and Garrett to see if they have any recollection of that, and neither of them do. So this working group may have just been some county officials who got together. It's not certain. And it does appear certain that no evidence of whatever it was they decided exists, but it also appears certain that it wasn't something that the city or the agency consented to, assuming that there was a working group. So, yeah, like I said, we have not received any paperwork on that. There's nothing new from the tax commission on the issue yet, although the county has asked the tax commission about it, which would be indicative of the fact that they aren't certain. Although, to be fair, I ask the tax commission stuff sometimes when I'm very certain, but it helps to have that. So it could indicate either of those. And at this point, there was an attempt to schedule a meeting prior to Thanksgiving that fell through because of Thanksgiving, and Mark has renewed discussions with scheduling a meeting with Zach Wesley and Zach Wagner at the county to talk about it, and that's where it's at. And those are my 3 items. Any questions on those?
Do we have any idea the dollar amount that we're talking about here?
So, I don't think so. The county will know for certain what the dollar amount is, but I don't think we've been provided with that. We also don't have, well, no, I won't go into that. Exactly what the amount is in total over the 20-year period, exactly what amount might actually be accessible through some attempt to force the county to permit it to the agency. That's unclear because of the passage of time. So, not certain exactly what that amount is. Again, the county should be able to identify exactly the amount over the 20-year period.
Because we're talking since 1998 here.
Right. Now, they have been, in my understanding, they've been remitting late taxes. So the actual tax payment has been coming, even if paid late. So it'd be essentially a percentage calculated off unpaid taxes. So whatever the amount of unpaid taxes is year over year. Oh, she's gone. Anyway, I'm sure there's some fairly standardized percentage every year that are taxes that are unpaid. The levy rate multiplied by that amount divided by the agency plus interest and fees, which would also be nominal. My guess is that it's not enormous, but that it's still significant enough to be worth inquiring more about.
So as I recall, Mark said there's somebody up north working on this, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember if it was either another county that either did the same thing or did a different thing. I can't remember, but my sense of it was that he had there was another law firm or city internal legal counsel who was looking at the same issue. Whether that will be beneficial or not, hard to say. I can't imagine it hurting. So it's you're not the only agency, I think, that is having to address the issue. So.
Hypothetically, if there was money reimbursed or coming back, would that be received by the standing urban renewal agency or the one that would sunset?
So, a clarifying point, the agency was created by a legislative act of the city council, and the plan was created by a separate legislative act. And the new plan, if there was no new plan adopted, the agency would persist. The plan is basically a project you are engaged in administering, but it doesn't affect your existence. And so, if if there was an amount that had to be paid that ought to have been paid but was not, that was remitted, it would be remitted to the agency. And the law certainly doesn't provide for exactly what to do in the event of an underpayment by the county. It's just not that specific. But I think an argument could be made that it would be similar to revenue received in the assessment year, in the calendar year following the final assessment year. And so, and there also would be a good articulation if somebody said, well, why haven't you spent that money yet? Well, we didn't have it yet. So I don't think it would create a huge legal problem if it was remitted.
Very good. Any other questions for Mr. Waterman?
Just one.
Yes, sir.
How's it going, Mr. Waterman? Good?
Gooder and gooder.
So I think a few of us still have questions about the list. We've discussed it in a couple meetings before, and it sounds like it's still being generated. And those folks that may owe Urban Renewal something, of course, the concern is we're coming to an end, but such as the contract we've discussed on the $308,000. So we're just looking for who may, I don't know if this is the right terminology, owe Urban Renewal or the city or whatever the contract says they owe the funds to, and when they're obligated to pay those. So we're still looking forward to that list soon.
Sure. So there should not be any DDAs or development agreements that oblige a payment to the agency. There should only be obligations to pay the city because the agency doesn't have any infrastructure it maintains or improves that it owns. It participates in the improvement and maintenance, but it doesn't own them. So there may be DDAs that have a payment obligation to the city, and the ones that the question would apply to would be DDAs. Well, I guess it'd be all of them, just in case something I guess the concern would be that something would slip through the cracks. So synonymous to that concern would be something that did slip through the cracks. So it'd be a matter of collecting the DDAs the agency has signed that have gone all the way to closing, because of course there are some that fall through, and identifying any payment obligation in those to the city, and I'll follow up with Mr. Hilty on that tomorrow, and we'll probably as soon as we can.
Any other questions for Doug? Very good. Thanks.
Thanks
for hanging in there. Takes us to our commissioner reports. Any reports this evening?
I've talked enough.
Me too.
I think we had a great time with the Salvation Army here this last weekend, and it went really well. The Lions teamed up with them. There was a real big push, and the Salvation Army here in town benefited.
Excellent.
Had a good time.
Excellent. Great. Well, I've got nothing to report at this late hour. And so do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Thanks, everybody.
So, Julia?